You are watching Code with Samijit, and in this series of video, we are going to build an Express TypeScript framework for building backend APIs. As you know, TypeScript is one of the most commonly used language to build scalable and reliable applications. And if you are in the Node.js ecosystem, you are already aware about Express. Express is one of the most downloaded package in npm repository for building APIs with help of Node.js. Now, in this series of video, I am going to combine the power of these two, the TypeScript language and Express, to build a framework which can be used by other developers to build scalable, maintainable backend APIs. This video is not going to be a simple API demonstration or how to build APIs with help of TypeScript or Express, but in this series of video, we will take it up a notch and I will show you how you can create your own custom framework. And this framework can be used by other developers to build APIs. And here I will show you how to write well organized, well maintained, and layered architectured code. We are going to use the TypeScript language fundamentals like object oriented programming and some of the super advanced concepts like decorators and reflections and dependency injection to create this framework. And decorators, I'm not going to discuss one decorator or two decorator. I'm going to discuss all three decorators: the class decorator, the method decorator, and the parameter decorator. Now, what is the objective of this course? Now, the main objective is to solidify your understanding of the TypeScript language and mastering the art of building APIs and a framework. So, this will help you in solidifying your TypeScript concept starting from basic, very fundamental object oriented programming to the super advanced concepts. And here I am going to follow a three-tier architecture. I'll show you how to create the controller or the controller layer. I will show you how to create the service layer and how to create the repository pattern. And here in this series of video, towards the end, I'll show you how to set up Postgres database, and we are going to use the ORM framework, that is TypeORM. And I will also show you how to create migrations and how to run and deploy and work with migrations in TypeORM. I will show you how to leverage the power of dependency injection, one of the most powerful concept in object-oriented programming. This will help us in writing reusable and, most importantly, unit testable components. Now, to build this framework, I have definitely taken a lot of inspiration from Nest.js. If you don't know Nest.js, it's a highly opinionated framework which is used to build backend APIs with help of Node.js. And lot of design principles and developer experience that we are going to discuss in this video is highly inspired from the framework Nest.js. Although this video or this framework that we are going to build, it might not be able to meet the maturity level of a well-maintained framework like Nest.js, but it is still very efficient and production ready in terms of handling lot of API requests and large-scale production use cases. Now, one of the prerequisite to take this course is that you should have thorough understanding of TypeScript language. You should understand object-oriented programming. You should understand dependency injection. You should understand decorators, the class decorator, the method decorator, and the parameter decorator. And you should have the fundamental concept of reflection clear. And the good news is I have covered all of this fundamental concept in my TypeScript playlist. The link is given in the description. Feel free to check that out. But understanding those concepts are extremely important to follow in this series of videos. Now, of course, as always, I will share you the code repository, but after some time, after a week or two of the release date of this video, I will share the code repository with you. Okay, and whenever I share, I will update in the description. So keep an eye on the description box if you are interested in taking a copy of the source code. Now, enough of the introduction. Now, let us go to our code editor and start setting up our project. Before we proceed any further, if so far you are liking this video, give this video a thumbs up share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, because this is the kind of content I bring on this channel on a regular basis. Now let's continue to the video. Now, to do the basic project setup, what we have to do, we have to first select a particular folder or directory in our system and open that particular location on the default terminal application. So here I have opened the particular folder. Now this is just a simple folder, right? Now I have to convert it into an npm project. So for that, what I will do, I'll say npm init and I'll pass the -y flag. That means it will accept all the default values in the package.json. Okay, so now this is done. I will clear, and then what I will do, I will install all the dependency and the npm dependency in one go, so that when you are following along later in this video, you don't have to keep on switching and installing new dependency. We'll add all the dependency at once. Okay, and then you can follow along throughout the video. So what dependency we need? So I will say npm install, okay, class transformer and class validator. Okay, then .env express, then pg, then reflect metadata, then type di, and I'll press enter. Let this much first install. Okay, then we'll install some more. Then I'll again say npm install typeorm and typeorm type di extension. Okay, so don't worry, I'll give this full command in the description. You can just copy and install it, and it should be extensions. Okay, now once this is done, I will clear and I will say npm install -d. That means we are going to install few dev dependency. First is at types/express and at types/node. Okay, so this will give the type definition for express and node.js, right? So that our code editor or the TypeScript will know what types we have to use for express and node. Okay, then we have to use nodemon and TypeScript and TS node. So TS node will run the node.js project without us to transpile into JavaScript. Okay, so I will install these dependencies also. Now, once these tasks are done, I will clear the screen, and now you open this particular folder in your favorite code editor. I'm going to use VS Code, but feel free to use whatever code editor you want to use. Okay, so here I have opened VS Code. So if you see, this is the package.json that was created, and these are all the dependency. Okay, now what we will do, we have, since this is a TypeScript project, right? So we have to add a TS config, and what we have to add in this. So here I am adding very basic configuration options. Okay, so the target is yes next. Okay, and this experimental decorator is needed. It should be marked as true for us to work with decorators, and this decorator metadata. So if this is not set to true, we will not be able to use reflections. Okay, so module common.js root dir and out dir. So src will be our source directory, and out dir the dist, this will have the compiled or transpiled JavaScript. Okay, now what I will do, I'll create the src folder, and in this src folder I'll just create an index.ts, and here I will say console.log hello world. And of course, when we start building our project, we will start writing some actual code into this. Now we will add few script. Okay, so first script is our build script. So what will be the content of the build script? Nothing but tsc, TypeScript compiler. So we'll just run the TypeScript compiler and let it build and transpile. Then we will have a start script. Okay, so the start script will use node, and it will take its data from dist and index.js. Okay, and I'll add a dev script, so it will use nodemon and it will run on src index.ts. Okay, now if I open my terminal and if I run npm run build, what will happen? It will run the tsc command, and if you open this one, it has created a dist folder, and here the transpiled index.js is sitting, which has come from index.ts, right? And what other command we had? So I'll clear this one and npm run start. So this will take node from dist and it will run it. Eventually, this will start running our Express application. Okay. And similarly, what I can do, I can say npm run dev. So this will take node mode and keep it in watch mode. Okay. So if I make any change like this, and if I save, what will happen? It will automatically rerun my code. Okay. So this is going to be the base setup. And in the next video, we will start setting up Express and our API. So in the last video, we did the basic project setup. Now let us move forward, and in this video we will do the basic app setup with the help of Express, and we will add one controller. And here we will see the need of dependency injection. What is the need of dependency injection, where it is used, and what tools we have to help us in doing the dependency injection. So let us start. So in last video, this is where we have left. We added a index.ts and we added a console log statement here. Now what we will do, we will add a app.ts, and in that app.ts, we will set up our Express application, right? So I'll say new file and I will say app.ts. Okay. And since this is going to be heavily object oriented, so the app will obviously be a class, right? So I'll say export class app. Okay. And what this will have, this will have one property called private app. Okay. And what will be the type of this one? This will be of type application coming from Express, right? So this is going to be an Express application, right? And I will add a constructor. Okay. And in this constructor, I will say this dot app equals to our Express application, right? And what we will do, we will import it here. So it will say Express, right? Then here what I will do, I'll add a start method. Okay. So when somebody calls this start method, it will start listening on a particular port, right? So I'll say public start. Okay. Now first thing is I want to initialize a port. Okay. So for now I'm just hard coding it. Okay. So I'll say const port equals to 8000. Okay. So it will listen on port 8000. For now it is hard coded. Later we'll see how we can get it from different config sources. So I will say this dot app dot listen. Okay. Where it will listen? It will listen on the port, and it will have a callback function. And in this callback function, I'll add a simple console log. Okay. Which will print a simple message: server is running on port, and we will give the port number. Okay. So port, right. Now here in index.ts, what I will do, I'll remove this. So here what I will do, I'll say class main. Okay. And here we'll have a private property called app. Okay. And this will be of type app coming from our /app.ts, right? This one, this is the type that I am assigning here, right? And I will add a constructor. Okay. And in this constructor, I'll say this dot app equals to new app, right? And here what I will do, this dot app dot start, right? So this is the method that we have added, right? So this is pretty much going to be our main class. And what I can do, I'll say simply new main. Okay. So what this will do, this will create a new instance, right? When this instance is created, this constructor will be called, right? When this constructor is called, this start method will be invoked, right? So when I go inside this start method, what will happen? It will start listening on a particular port, right? So I will save this one and I will open the terminal, and it says server is running on port 8000, right? This is what we were trying to do. Now if you see, I'm getting one squiggly error here. Okay, cannot find module, right? So if you see, we are not getting any syntax error on the terminal, right? That means this syntax is correct. For some reason VS Code is not able to pick this up, right? So what I will say, I'll open this one and I will say developer reload window. See, when I do a reload window, this error is gone, right? If I save this one, everything is working, right? There was no problem, just a VS Code issue. Okay. So our Express app setup is completed. Now what we will do with this Express setup, right? We need a controller, right? So let us add a controller. And how we will add controllers? So I will create a folder called books. So books is one module. Okay. We can have multiple modules, right? So first let me start with the book module. Okay. Inside this, we'll add all the entities that are related to book. Okay. So first entity is of course our controller. So I will say book.controller.ts, right? So this is going to be the convention. file name dot purpose name dot ts, right? So we might add service, we might add middlewares and so many things, right? So book dot controller dot ts. Okay, and what is this going to be? This is obviously going to be a class, right? So export class, I'll say book controller, right? Now what this will have, this will have a route instance, right? So I'll say private router of type router, and this router will come from Express, right? And I will say constructor this dot router equals to the router function. Okay, so this is how we do basic Express setup, right? We have routers. Okay, that router will have functions respective to the get and post and delete method, right? And that router is attached to the app as a middleware app.use, right? So we will see that flow. Now here what I will do, I'll add some hard-coded book information. Okay, so this is an array. It has title, description, some ISBN information, price and pages. Okay, so these are all made up data. Okay, so like that I have few instances of books. Okay, so temporarily I'll use this as a say database kind of thing. Okay, we'll add database later, but this is going to be our data source for now. Okay, so what do we need? We will start very simple. Okay, we will add just two methods. One is get all and one is get by id. Okay, so I'll say get all books. Okay, and what this will take, this will take a request and a response, right? This is because this is going to be express function, right? So this request is going to type request and it will come from express. Okay, and this response is going to be of type response, and this will also come from express. Okay, not from any other source, it should come from express, right? And here what I will do, I'll say res dot status of 200. Okay, dot json, and what I'll send the books instance, right? Similarly what I can do, get book by id, and it will be same request of type request and response of type response, right? And here what I have to do, I have to get the book id, right? So the book id that I'm trying to access, right? So it will be const, okay, book id equals to request dot params dot id, right? So this id is the query params, right? I'll show you how we can fetch this one, right? Now the thing is, these are index, right? 0 1 to array index, right? And query param will come as string, right? So we have to parse it, right? So I will add this error handling. Okay, and I will say parse int. Okay, parse int, and I'll add a fallback value of 0. Okay, so see here, this is string 0, right? Not a number 0, because I'm doing parse int on this, right? So if this at all happens, this 0 will be parsed to integer and id will be 0, right? Of course this is not the very robust way of error handling, and I'm not doing error handling as of now. I'll show it in the later videos, but for now the very basic implementation I'm trying to show here. Okay, then I'll say res dot status of obviously 200, and as I said, no error handling here. This is very simple implementation. We will do all the error handling later, right? And json, what will be the json value? It will have books and the book id, the index, right? And I will do one thing, I will add a private access modifier to this one, right? So private and private, because I don't want this value to be exposed outside, right? I'll add a proper route to access invoke these functions, right? Now what do we need? See, the functions are there, but it should be attached to the router, right? Otherwise this won't work, right? So I will add one more private method. Okay, I'll call it as initialize routes. Okay, and here what I will do, I will say this dot router dot get, right? This is going to be a get method on which path? On root path of a particular URL, something similar to this one. So we will have localhost, okay, then port 8000, then slash books slash this much. Okay, so this is the root path, right? And say for example, if I add 3, so this will be the params value, right? Query param. So this is going to be the param value for this root path slash books, right? So where we will add this books, I'll show you later, but for now what we are doing, we are adding this path, right, in the router function. So here on the root path of books router, which I'll show you later where to add, what I can say, this dot get all books dot bind to this function, this particular class. Okay, because this will be running on different context, right? When we are going to use dependency injection framework, this is not always going to run on the this book controller. So I'm tightly coupling it with the book controller instance. Okay, and I will also do this dot router dot get. Okay, this will be slash colon id, right? And it will be this dot get books by id dot bind, and it is binding to this particular instance of the class, right? So this colon id is what I'm parsing here, right? Okay, great. And what I should do with this one, I should call this one, so this dot initialize routes. Perfect. So what we have done, we have added few methods, okay, and we have tied them to a particular http methods, to a particular http method, right? To get, for now it is get, but eventually we will add post and put and delete and everything, right? But this is just a starting point. Great. So now let us come to our app. Okay, so what we will do, we will add a private variable called book controller, which is going to be of type book controller, right? Book controller. And here what I can do, this dot book controller equals to new book controller. Okay, one more caution here, what I'm saying, this is not the correct way. Okay, I'll fix it very soon. Okay, but this is not the correct way, but just to make the app running, I'm doing this. Okay, now the controller, I'm able to get an instance of this controller, right? Now what I'm going to do with this controller, so let me create a method. Okay, private, I'll say initialize controllers. Okay, now what I'll do here, I'll say this dot app dot use. Okay, use on what, on books, the path, what I have to use, this dot book controller dot router. And here if you see, I'm getting squiggly. Okay, so here it should be public because I'm going to use this outside, right? So this dot book controller dot router is attached to slash books root path. Okay, and if you go to router, it has two http verbs or two get verbs. One is on the root and one is root slash a particular value, right? So I will save all of this one. Now once we have added this function, what we can do, this dot initialize controller, we will call it in the constructor, right? So now what will happen, we don't have to do anything on the index.ts. When we instantiate this new app, what will happen, it will create an express instance. Okay, it will create the book instance and it will initialize the controllers, right? So that means these paths will be attached. After that we are doing start, so it will start listening on the servers. Now let us check the console and see if we have any errors. We don't have any errors, right? So now let me open postman and we try to send a request. Okay, so this is on the local host. Okay, and on slash books. Okay, the root path. Okay, so let me send the request, right? So what we are getting all the books, right? We are getting all the 5 books that we have added, the constant that we have added, right? Now let us say book 1. Okay, so if we send this one, we'll get the book value, right? So book 1, that means the index 1. Okay, so it says whisperers of the banyan tree. So let me open our code, and if we see here the 0th index and the first index, right? So the whisperers of the banyan tree, so we are getting this particular value, right? Now let me come here and discuss about this statement. Okay, this is not the correct way. Why? Because a class should not instantiate its own dependency. Okay, that is the rule. Okay, otherwise this particular class, this app class, is tightly coupled with book controller instance, this book controller class. Okay, and this is not something what we want. We don't want tight coupling. Okay, so this is not the correct way to do it. Okay, now if this is not the correct way, then what is the correct way? Okay, now we have to understand one concept, that is the dependency. So what is the dependency? This app class is dependent on this book controller, right? Similarly, this main class is dependent on this app instance or this app class, right? So this is the dependency. So here, if we don't want to create this kind of dependency directly within the class, then what is the solution? The solution is the dependency should be injected through the constructor, right? So we should do it like this. So it should take a book controller, which is also going to be of type book controller, and instead of instantiating a new instance, it should be assigned to the instance in the class. Okay, so when we do this, what will happen, this new app, okay, we are passing it as a constructor, right? If you see here, we are passing it as constructor argument, right? And where we are calling this app, we are calling this app here, right? So here we should pass the new book controller, right? Then only it will work, right? Through the dependency injection. Okay, so if I save this one, okay, so this is first part. Okay, now let me take one example here. Okay, so this book controller, Okay, let us create a class. Okay, I'll say export class logger. Okay, so it has two methods. Okay, one is log. Okay, and one is error. Okay, I'm not giving the implementation because this is just some explanation. Okay, now this book controller say is dependent on this logger, right? So how it will be dependent? So we'll say private logger of type logger, right? And on the constructor I should pass, right? That's what we have identified. So it will take a logger instance, and here what I should do, this dot logger equals to logger, right? And then I can use it wherever I want, right? So I can say this dot logger dot log or error, whatever I want, right? So this is just for the explanation. Okay, now what has happened here? See, we are getting one more error again here, right? Why? Because our book controller is now expecting a log instance to be passed, right? So what I have to do, I have to come here and I have to say new logger, right? Then only it will be fixed. Now let us say, for example, this logger class, okay, it is again dependent on another class, say config class, right? I'm not doing any implementation. Okay, so let us say private config. Okay, it is expecting of type config, and in the constructor I have to pass the config value, which of course has to be type config, right? And this dot config equals to config, right? Now again what happened? See, this guy again broke. Why? Because again it is expecting one more dependency, new config, right? So now you are able to see the problem. Imagine having 50 such controllers and you want to add one dependency and you have to update it in many places, right? This is one place. You might have used it in any other place, right? And in real world app you might have 50, 60, even 100 controllers, right? So passing value through the constructor is correct. Okay, but every time I update a dependency I have to come and update the source also, right? And again it will be confusing, right? This is just a simple code, but in big code base it won't be that easy to find that controller and add the dependencies, right? So this is where dependency injection framework comes into picture. What they will do, they will expose a container. Okay, and in that container we'll have instance of a particular class along with its dependency, right? I have already made a video in my TypeScript section. I'll put a link in the description or in the I button. Feel free to check that one. There we discussed in detail the problem of dependency injection, and we created our own dependency injection container, small container, mini container. Okay, but now we need something more production ready, right? So for that we already have added this type di, right? So this is the dependency injection framework. We are going to use this one and we'll see if we can solve this problem. Of course we can solve this problem, right? So here what I will do, I'll say import reflect metadata, right? This is needed from now on. Now, so I talked about a dependency injection container, right? So what that container will have, it will have the instance of a particular class along with its dependency. But how that particular class will go into that container? If I want to add a class to a container, see, all I have to do is I have to add a decorator, call it a service. Okay, service. And this service is coming from this type di npm package. As soon as I do this, my container will have an instance of this config along with all its dependency. Okay, here it doesn't have a dependency, that's fine. Similarly, here also I can do a service. Okay, now the dependency injection container will see, okay, it has a dependency of config, right? It will check the config in its container and it will find, because we have added it in the dependency container, right, through this service. So it will create an instance of this logger along with this config, so we don't have to inject it anywhere. Okay, I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so I'll add a service here also, right? As soon as I add service, it will become part of the dependency injection framework, right? So as soon as I add the service, I can access it without passing it directly in the controller from here, right? I'll show you. So here also I will add a service, and this will come from type di. Now if you see, this app, okay, is part of container and it has a dependency called book controller, right? So what the type di will do, it will create instance of this app along with this dependency. And when this is creating this book controller, it will see that it has a log dependency. So it will create an instance of book controller which has log as a dependency, right? So it will manage the dependency chain for me. Okay, now what I have to do, I can remove this one. Okay, if I simply remove this one, of course it will throw error. Now, what we have to keep in mind is when we are working with the dependency injection framework, we do not use this new app or new method. Okay, we do not use the new instantiation. We do not use the new keyword to do the instantiation. Okay, then how we will do the instantiation? We will say container dot get app. See, now when I do this, I'll get an app, okay, which has this book controller already injected into it, and this book controller has already logger injected into it, and this logger has already config injected into it. Okay, because I have added service everywhere, all of these are part of my dependency injection framework. Right now, when I save this one, it will work. Okay, no errors. Earlier it was showing error, right? Constructor config was not provided and everything. If you see, there are a lot of errors, right? Book controller was not provided. Okay, so now it is working. Okay, and let me run a controller, right? It will work. So to get the instance of a class, you can use container.get. This should be the starting point. Once you do this, all its dependency will be already available to you, right? What else I can do? See, here I am doing new app. Why this is okay? Because this app main class doesn't have any dependency, right? Just for example, okay, what I can do, I can add it also in the container by adding a service method, service decorator, right? So I'll say quick fix and update import from type di, right? Now here, what I can do, I can say app of type app, okay, and instead of container dot get, what I can do, I can say app, right? Assign the value. Now it is throwing error. Okay, so what is the solution? I'll say container dot get main, right? So this is the replacement of new main or any new instantiation or instantiation using the new keyword, right? So now when I do this, okay, again it will start working, right? So server is running on a particular port, okay, and if I run the postman, of course I can get all the value, right? All the value we can see, right? So this is the power of dependency injection, right? So you create chain of dependency. So main is dependent on app, right? App is dependent on book controller, and it might not only depend on book controller, but it might depend on hundreds of controllers, right? As I said before, real world application doesn't have one controller, right? And this book controller might be dependent on multiple classes, right? Like logger class. So I hope you got the point, right? So now what I'll do, I'll remove all of this. All of this means this logger and config, because for now this is not part of our current implementation. I just added it to just give a demo, right? So I'll remove this logger, and this logger also I'll remove. This logger also I'll remove. Okay, and if I have anything here, I'll remove all this dependency. Book controller also I don't need here, right? So I'll remove all of this. Okay, and I'll save this one. Let me check once. See if server is running on port 8000, and I will run this once. Okay, so everything is working perfectly, right? Right. Great. So this is where I am ending this video. In the next video, we will see how we can enhance the controller by adding decorators to that, so that we don't have to do the manual controller initialization in our app class. Okay, so in the last video, we did the basic app setup and we completed our first controller. Okay, so if you see there, what we were doing, we were creating a instance of our controller, and we were assigning it a value that was injected through the constructor, and then we were initializing, right? So this was the flow. Now let us take it up a notch. Okay, and what we will do, we will enhance this. So now what is the problem here? If you see, we have a book controller variable inside this app. So in real world, there might be n number of controllers, like 50, 60, 100 controllers. So it is not always feasible, okay, to have a property and then inject it through the constructor. So say for example, there are 50 controllers, right? So you have to pass 50 such controllers from the constructor of this app, right? That is not feasible, and that is also not a good programming technique, right? So we should be able to optimize this. So we should be able to automate it somehow, right? So this is what we will see in this video. Okay, so let me first start. Okay, so if you see, the server is running. Okay, so let me comment out, okay, this line. Okay, and instead, can I write it like this? This dot app dot get. Okay, our example is to get calls, right? But instead this could have been post or put or delete, right? So this is the HTTP method. Okay, so get slash books, okay, slash, okay, so I don't have to give the default slash, right? And here can I do like this? Can I do like this? This dot books controller dot get all books, right? And why I'm getting squiggly? Because this is private. Now let me make it public. Okay, so I'll change it to public. Okay, so I can do this, and similarly what I can do, I can say this dot app dot get, okay, slash books slash colon id, okay, and this dot book controller dot get book by id. So this will also work. So instead of use, I'm saying get, okay, and I'm giving the full path. Okay, here what was the difference? It was only one path, okay, and there were multiple routers and there were multiple function instance attached to the router. Now we have skipped this router, okay, and I'm adding directly the function and I'm binding it to the path plus whatever is the path, right? So will this work? So this is the base idea. Okay, so let me save this one, and if you see there are no errors, right? And if I open Postman and if I try to send a request, right, obviously this will work, right? So this is going to be the base of our project. Okay, this is the main inspiration. So we are trying to achieve something similar here. So if you see closely these two lines, okay, what are the things that we need to automate the controller initialization or the method initialization? Okay, so if you see what we need the method, we need the method, right? So in this case this is get method, and it could be post method or post or put or delete, right? Then what else we need? We need the base path, right? So what is the base path here? This slash books, right? This slash books is the base path, right? Then what else we need? We need the root path, right? So in this case this is the slash, and in this case this is the colon id, right? So this is very similar to these two, right? Okay, then what else do we need? We need the controller, okay, and we need the method instance, right? So the controller and the method instance. So if by somehow I can get all this information without having this controller injected into the dependency chain, I should be able to recreate this one. Okay, if this is difficult to understand, just follow along. Okay, and I'll clearly show you step by step how all this fits into the picture. Okay, so we'll solve this puzzle together. Okay, great. So we need this many information. Okay, great. So let us start. So let me first start by this base path. Okay, base path is books here. So how can I get the base path? So here, okay, so since I said that this is going to be a Nest.js inspired project setup, so here what I'm doing, for every controller, okay, I'm going to decorate this with a controller decorator. Okay, and this will take slash books, right? So let me save this one. Okay, and if you see, this is giving us a squiggly. Why? Because this doesn't exist. We will be creating this one. Okay, so parallel to this book and inside this src, I'll create a new folder and name it as core. Now what is the significance of this name core? So core will have all the core functionality of our framework. Okay, other things will have the business logic, right? Whereas this core will have the functionality of our framework, right? Whatever is the core part that is going to be used everywhere, right? That will sit inside our core. Okay, and inside this core I'll add a new folder and I will call it as decorators, because we are going to write bunch of decorators in this series of videos, right? That is the whole agenda here. Then I want to name it. Okay, whatever name you want you can give, right? But I'm going to give this name request dot decorators dot ts, right? So this is the naming convention that I discussed in the previous video. So if you see book, it is book.controller.ts, right? So this is request decorators.ts, right? Okay, so what will be my first decorator? The controller decorator, right? So export function, right? So I'll say controller, okay, and this will take a base path of type string, and I can default it to empty value, right? And this is going to return a class decorator, right? Perfect. So I will say return, okay, a function, and this will take a target, right? This is nothing but our class. Okay, and this target I am just assigning it as of type any, right? Ultimately this will be the class on top of which this decorator is added, right? So in this case it will be the controller, right? Perfect. Now what I will do, see what I need the base path. Now here I am going to use reflection. So what reflection does, I have already made a dedicated video about reflection in my TypeScript playlist. You want, you can watch that. That will be a refresher and that is needed to understand. So reflection, what it will do, it will store some key value pairs with respect to a particular class. Okay, so if you know key value pair, okay, we are storing basically key value pairs, then that is tightly coupled to a particular class. So for that class I can have n number of key value pairs. I can set it and I can get it. Okay, so it could be simple string, it could be complicated objects. Okay, so here what I will do, reflect, okay, dot define metadata. Okay, so I'll give it a name. Okay, so let me call it as base path. So this is the name, the key value pair, this is the key. Okay, and let me change this to path. Okay, so the value will be the base path. Okay, so don't get confused, this is the key and this is the value, right? The key could be xyz also, anything, right? So I'll change it to base path. Okay, now as I said, this key value pair is with respect to a particular class. Okay, so who is the class here? The target is the class here, right? So essentially what I have done, I have attached, okay, a base path key to this controller. Okay, that means let me show you. So say for example I have my reflection object. Okay, just this is a demonstrative example. Okay, not a real world example. Okay, so as I said, it is with respect to a class, right? So say for example base controller. Okay, I have a property called base path whose value is slash books, right? So internally this is what is happening. Okay, for this target, which is nothing but this book controller, okay, I am assigning a key value, right? In the same line, say for example I can add one more value also. Okay, say something a and b value, right? Example, right? So what this will do, for this target, okay, which is base controller, okay, I'll have a key and the b value, right? And later I'll show you how to fetch this one. Okay, so I will remove this one. Okay, great. Now one more thing, in this app ultimately I need a loop. Okay, I should be able to loop. Why? Because I'm not going to use this controller one by one, right? I should have a array of controllers and I should be able to loop on that, and I should be able to recreate this one. So that is my agenda. So for that, what I will say, I'll just create a array of my controllers. Okay, so here I will say export cons controllers. Okay, this is going to be of type any array and I'm initializing it with empty value. And here what I will do, controllers dot push, okay, what target, right? So what this will do, this will give me list of all controllers, right? Now in this function I have only access to one target on top of which this decorator is added. Okay, but ultimately I want list of all controllers. Okay, so I'll show you where this is used later in this video. So for now this is the controller decorator, right? Now if we come here and I'll go to quick fix, it says add import from the request decorator, right? So now this will work. Okay, now coming to this app. Okay, so we have this initialize controller. Okay, here, okay, I can say controllers. Okay, and this is coming from our request decorator. Okay, for each controller, and I will add a function. Okay, and for now, okay, let me just do console dot log and I will say controller. Okay, so if we come to our console, okay, here the class book controller. Okay, so this is the value that I am getting. Okay, from where? From our array, right? This array value. Okay, because I add a push. Okay, now how can I get this base path? Okay, so for this what we can do, we can say const base path equals to reflect dot get metadata. Okay, and it will take the key, right? The key is nothing but base path. Okay, base path, and what we want value, but it has two things, right? It has a key with respect to a class, right? So who is the class here? The controller is the class here, right? So I will say controller. Okay, so what I have done, I have pushed all my controllers into this array. Okay, and for each controller I have defined a base path. Now I'm looping through the controller, and for each controller I'm getting the base path with respect to that particular controller, right? So here what I can do, I can say console.log say base path, right? So let me save this one, and if you see here, I'm getting the controller and I'm getting the base path, right? So I'm able to get the base path. So my first, this one, second base path I'm able to get, and this will be for each controller, right? For now, on our example, we have only one controller, but you can understand that this is an array and it will loop for all controllers, right? So here we have sorted out our base path and our controller. Now what else we need? We need the method, HTTP method, right? The route path and the method. Let me just make it clear. This is the handler, okay? Handler, right? Which handler? These functions, get all books and get books by ID, right? So base path and controller is sorted out. These three are pending, right? We'll check this, okay? So how do we handle this? So similarly, how we added this controller decorator, okay? What I can do, I can create a get decorator, and let me make it capital, okay? And it can take a value, and it can be root path or it could be empty, right? And similarly, let me copy and paste it here, and what will be the path here? This ID. So this route path, right? Because that's what we need next, right? The route path, right? So this is the route path, right? So I should be able to pass this route path to this method. And similarly, for now I'm just showing for the get, but I'll show you for the post and put and delete in the similar way later in the video, right? Let us define, okay? So this is export function, okay? Get, and it will be root path of type string, and by default let me add empty value, right? And this is going to return a method decorator, okay? And this will return a function, okay, which will have the target and the property key, okay? Perfect. So now if you are getting confused, so this target and this target is same, right? So whichever function this decorator is added, okay, so here the property key will be this get all books, okay, and the target will be the parent class or the class within which this method exists, right? So if you want, I can show you, okay, console.log target and property key, okay? And here let me do the import, okay? So import decorator, right? So if you see, this is the target, okay, and this is the method, right? But okay, so if you see, this is giving us an empty object, right? Why is that? So to get its actual value, I'll say target dot constructor, okay? So now if you see, okay, what we have the class book controller, and this is the property key. Similarly, another class and another property key. Why? Because I have added this decorator in two places. So that's why we are getting these two logs, right? So this is the class and this is the property on which the decorator is added. Now, okay, now what we will do, I'll remove this console log, okay. Now what I want to attach, so if we come back here, okay, we need the method, okay, we need the root path, and we need the handler name, right? So let me create a object, okay, and let me call it as current route, okay, and this is going to be a method, and it will have few values, okay. So I'll say method, and this is going to be the get method. Why? Because this decorator is for this get function, right? Get HTTP method. So I'm saying the method as get. Then what else? We need the path, and this is going to be the route path, right? And what else? We want the handler. right? So this is going to be the property key, and I'm getting error because I'm missing one comma here. Okay, now if you see this current root, it has a couple of properties, right? So can I create a type of this one? So I can say export type route equals to method of type string, okay, and path of type string, okay, and handler of type string or symbol. Okay, now why string or symbol? Okay, so if you see here the property key, okay, if you see the VS Code suggestion, this property key is of type string or symbol, right? So that's why I'm assigning string or symbol as the type for this handler, right? So I'll say route. Okay, so this is the type. Okay, now where we will add this one, we will add on the metadata for this target with respect to this property key. Okay, now what do I mean by that? So if you see here, I'm doing a reflect metadata, right? So here also I'll say reflect, okay, dot define metadata, okay, and I can name it something. So I can say routes, okay, and what will be the value? Okay, this is very important. Okay, so can I simply say current route as the value with respect to target? Okay, the answer is no. Okay, why? Because here if you see there are multiple get methods, right, and there could be post method also, right, and all of these are attached, okay, to this book router, right? So here first what I should do, I should take a variable, okay, const, I'll say routes, which is of type route array, okay, and I should first reflect dot get metadata, okay, which metadata? Routes with respect to this target, right? So if there are any previous metadata that is already pushed, okay, that I should be able to get. If not, I should have an empty array, right? And this routes, okay, dot push, okay, this current route, okay, and instead of this define metadata with current route, okay, I should attach it with routes. Okay, so let me explain it again. Okay, so when your code runs, okay, it will first check this get method, right? So it will come here and it will create this object, and if you simply add this object here, it will add it. Okay, next time when this value, the second method runs, what will happen? It will again recreate this value and it will override this one. Okay, so what will happen? We will lose this first decorator, right? That's why what I'm doing, I'm pushing it in an array. But if I have to push it in an array, what I have to do, I have to get the previous value first, or if it doesn't have any previous value, empty object, right? So when it doesn't have any value, when this first get value, get decorator runs, right? So it will not have any value, so it will be an empty array, and this value will be pushed first. So method will be get, route path will be slash, and property key will be get all books, right? Now next time when this runs, because of this decorator, what will happen? I will get this value first, which will have the root path of this one. Okay, I will get, and I will add a new value which is corresponding to this one, and then this together I will push. So now it will have array of information, right? I hope that is clear, right? So we have added a base path with respect to target, and we have added a routes with respect to target, right? So let us get this routes. So what I will do, I will copy this one, okay, and I will say routes of type route array, okay, and it will be of type this one routes. Okay, so with respect to this controller, I am fetching routes similar to how I was fetching base path, right? So instead of this base path, now let me console log the routes, okay, and run this one. So I'm getting undefined. Let us check why I'm getting undefined. Okay, so why I was getting undefined? Because I have to add the target dot constructor, right? Otherwise it was just an empty object, right? So target dot constructor. So now if I go to my console log, so if you see my class, okay, and with respect to that I have my method, the path, and the handler, right? So this is what I wanted: method, path, and handler. So if you see here, the method, the route path, and the handler. This is what I wanted, right? So what I will do, I will say routes dot for each. Okay, it will be route. Okay, and I add a function. Now what I can do, I have to mimic this thing, right? I have all the information with me, so now I have to just assemble it, right? So this dot app, now I have to use the get or post or whatever is the method, right? So from where I'll get it from route dot method, right? So this dot app dot get is same as this one, this dot app and the route method, right? Then what we will do, this is controller path plus the root path, right? So I will say base path, okay, plus route dot path. Okay, so this will give me these two value, books and route dot path, right? So I'll get books slash colon id, right? Then I need this controller instance, right? How can I get the controller instance? See, I have the controller name, this is just the name, right? Not the instance. So how can I get the controller instance? I'll say const instance equals to container from type di, okay, dot get what, get the controller, right? So if you see here index, what I'm doing, container dot get and the name of the class, right? Same thing I am doing here, container dot get controller, right? So this will give me the controller instance, which is a executable instance, right? So once I have this instance, what I can do, instance, and I can say route dot handler, and since it doesn't know the context, I can bind it to this particular instance, right? So if I save this one and if I run, see, everything is working. So server is connected, right? So what we have done, we have mimicked, right? So now I will comment out this one, and now the moment of truth. So if everything is working properly, okay, I should be able to access the routes from the postman, right? So let us check. See, I'm able to get, right? Let me send this other request. See, I'm able to get, right? So now what I have done, I don't have to do this. Okay, when I write a controller, all I have to do is decorate this with controller, and all the methods, the http methods, that I will decorate with the respective method decorator, right? Later videos I will show you how to create it for put, post, delete and everything. This is more or less very similar. Okay, so we have achieved a good level of automation here, right? So I'll keep this commented so that you can reference this later, but the base logic is already added here, and I will remove this one, this console.log, right? Perfect. Now one small enhancement I want to do here. If you see, I have a service as well as a controller, two decorators, right? And this looks little odd to check, right? Because always you have to add two decorators, right? Can we do the same with only one decorator? I cannot remove this one, right? Otherwise it will start failing, because I'm doing this book controller, okay, and I'm getting the instance, so it should be part of my di container, right? So instead of adding it here, okay, what I can do, I can come here, okay, I can come here and I can say service, which is come from this type di, and I will assign it to target. Okay, so the same thing that was happening here, okay, the target is this one only, right? So the service was added here, and for it target was the book controller. Now for the same target, okay, I'm calling the service. Okay, so I don't have to add two different decorators, only one decorator. I'll be able to manage my, I'll be able to do my job, right? Okay, I'll save, I'll check the console, everything is working. Okay, and I'll come to postman and I will send a request and verify that is working, right? So we have achieved good amount of automation. More is still to come, right? We'll add lot of this kind of decorator related functionality. Okay, so in the last video we did our basic controller setup with help of decorators, and we added this for each logic on the controllers, so that these controllers will be attached to our app, express app routes. Okay, now let us move to the next step and I will show you few caveats. Okay, so if you see here, we are not using this book controller, right? We have a controllers array, right, that we are using to loop around. So we are not using this one. Okay, so let me comment this out. Okay, and what about this one? So we are not also using this one, right? And what about this line? We are not using this line also, right? So let me comment out this one. Okay, and let me comment out, okay, this constructor argument. Okay, and I can comment out this one also, right? So like this. Okay, now when I open Postman and if I try to send a request, see, this is failing, right? Okay, so this is the problem. So as soon as I commented out some code, okay, it start failing. Okay, so if I uncomment this one, okay, and uncomment this one, what will happen now? If you see, okay, it will start working, right? So what is happening here? If I add this injection statement, it is working. If I remove this injection statement, this is not working. And this is not the desired behavior, right? Because initially I established that I don't want to add or inject 50, 60 controllers, right? Because in real world app, there will be 50, 60, 100, 200 controllers, right? And I cannot inject each and every of them in this particular constructor, right? So even if I write this much of logic and if I still have to inject the controllers, then this fails the purpose, right? So let us look for a other solution how we can achieve this without doing this injection, right? So here I will again comment it out, okay, and I will comment it this one also. Okay, now if you see, it will fail. Okay, now what we will do, we have to write a functionality, okay, which will dynamically load the controllers for me. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So I will add a function and I will call it as load controllers. Okay, now this function, it will traverse all the controllers and it will dynamically load it for me. Okay, so now let us see how to write this function. So for this I'll go to core and I'll add a new folder. I will call it as utils, okay, or some utility functions I will keep here. And here I'll add new file and I'll say load controllers.ts. Okay, so I will come here, okay, and I will add a function export function, okay, and load controllers. Okay, great. And I will come to app.ts and I will import the new load controller function. Okay, then I will come here, okay, and I will say const directory equals to underscore underscore dir name, right? Now what is this? So this is the directory name in which our current file exists, right? So this load controller, where this exists in core slash utils, right? So this dir name will give me that value. Okay, so let me do console.log and show you. Okay, so this will be dir. Okay, right? So if you see here, it is pointing to src core and util, right? Now what path I actually want? I want the src, that is the root path. Okay, because this is where all my controllers will sit, right? So for that, what I can do, I can say path dot join, okay, join what, this dir name, okay, and this dir name, this will join it with what, dot dot slash and dot dot slash. So it will come two step up, okay, and I will import, okay, path from path, right? Now if I do console log and I'll show you, see what this is printing. This is printing the src folder, right? So this is where we should start loading all our controllers, or all the controllers that are in src folder that I should be able to load, right? So let me remove this one. Okay, and what I can do, I can create a walk function that will, okay, that will take this directory and walk through that directory. That means traverse to that directory and try to see if inside that directory, if we have a folder or another directory or a file. Okay, if it is a file, see if it is a controller, or if it's a directory, okay, recursively call this function. Okay, so let me show you that. So I'll say function walk, okay, and we'll take the directory. Okay, now what we have to do, we have to read this directory. So for that I'll say import fs from fs, right? And this directory is of type string, right? That's what it is complaining. So inside this function, I will say fs dot read dir sync, okay, and I will give this directory, okay, and I will say with file type true, okay. So that means it will read with file type dot for each entry, okay. So this entry is the individual component of that directory, okay. So for src, okay, entry will be book core, okay, then app.ts, index.ts, right? So what we have to do, we have to loop through this directory structure, right? So I'll say const full path equals to, okay, path dot join, okay, dir and entry dot name, right? Now what is this full path? See, now we are in src, then we saw book, okay. So now I have to get the full path, so it will be src slash book, or if it is a app.ts, right? So this full path will be src slash app.ts, right? Now what we have to check, if entry dot is directory, okay, if this is the case, what we can do, we can again work on this full path, right? That means this full path is, say for example, on this book. So now I am on src function, okay, first entry is book, right? What is the full path of the book? Src slash book. If this is a directory, which is in this case, what it will do, it will work on this directory again. That is a recursive call, right? Okay, if this is not the case, okay, so I'll say else if, okay, entry is file, okay, and very important, okay, now what I will do, I will create a regular expression, okay, that will detect if it is a dot controller extension or not, right? So this is the regular expression, okay. So it should be dot controller dot ts or js, right? That's why in the beginning I said that I'm going to follow a particular convention, right? And this is where the convention pays off, right? So this is my regular expression pattern, right? So I'll say controller regex dot test, okay, entry dot name, right? So say for example, now it came to book, okay, and again it will loop, so it will find book.controller.ts, right? So what this will do, this regex pattern will definitely match, right? If this is the case, what I can do, console.log, okay, you can say loaded, okay, controller, and I can say full path, right? Let us see what is happening, at least in the console. Of course it will not load in the app, okay, but let us see in the console. And if you see, we are getting this error, right? Scanner is not a directory, okay. Why is that? Because is directory should be a function, okay. So now if we come here, okay, what it is saying, loaded controller, okay, and it is giving the path and src book.controller.ts, right? So I'm able to get the list of all controllers, or at least if I traverse my project, I can get the list of all files that are a valid controller, right? So now what I will do, I will say require, okay, require full path. I'll just import it or just load it, right? Perfect. Now I'll come here, okay. If you see, this is also commented out, this is also commented out, everything is commented out, right? And let me for now just comment out this one, okay. And if I show you, see, this is still failing, right? As soon as I acquire my controller, what will happen? See, it will start working, okay. Now why is that so? Why a require statement or an injection statement is needed? That is because the decorators that we have added here, okay, they run only when the file is loaded in the index.ts, okay. These controllers, okay, the TypeScript compiler will not go and check each and every decorator, and it will load it, right? Or it will run the function, right? For the TypeScript to see the decorator and execute its function, it needs the file to be loaded once in the index.ts or in the memory, right? So when we don't add this injection statement or this import statement, TypeScript compiler does not even check this book controller, okay. And that means none of this decorator ever gets executed, okay, and none of these methods are available, okay. So get metadata of base path, this particular controller doesn't exist, right? So that's why we had to do a manual load of all our controllers, right, in this app.ts, right? Once this is done, these decorators will be executed, right? And once this executed, it will have all the base path and everything available, and then this app instance will have all the route, okay, and this will start working, right? So that is the whole idea. Okay, now if you come to book controller, and if you see, now do we need this initialize routes? No, right? And do we also need this constructor? No, right? And do we also need this router? No, right? Because everything is being taken care by this decorator, right? Now if I save this one, okay, and if I see the console, see everything is working, and this controller is also loaded. Right now if I come and send a request, it will work, right? It will work, obviously, right? So now if you see, our code is extremely clean, right? So all we have to do when we have to add a route controller is just decorate this with add controller and this methods, right? So now we are going towards making a framework. We are slowly going there. Okay, so in the last video we completed our controller setup and we did the dynamic controller loading. Now it's time to work on middlewares. Okay, so as you already know what are middlewares, right? So middlewares are just function that sit in between your request and the handler function. Okay, so now we want to introduce middleware into our framework. Okay, so this is what I'm thinking to implement. Okay, and as I have said before, this is highly inspired from Nest.js framework. Okay, so this is what I want to do. Okay, I want to write a decorator and I want to call it as use middleware. Okay, use middleware, and here I want to pass a middleware class. Okay, so this logger is a middleware class. Now this is giving squiggly, and we are going to implement both of this. First, let me start with how we can define a middleware class. Okay, so in our framework we will define a very specific way of creating a middleware. Okay, so this is what I want to do in the core. Okay, I want to have a folder and I want to call it as interfaces. Here all the code interface will sit, and one of them is the middleware interface. Okay, so here I will say interfaces. Okay, and here I will add a new file and I will say I middleware.ts. Okay, so this is the convention I'm following for middleware. So here what I will do, I will say export interface. Okay, I middleware. Okay, and it will have a very specific function. Okay, that is use. So this is the function that somebody has to implement when they want to create a middleware function, right? So it will take request. Okay, this will be of type request and it will come from Express. Okay, just be careful of the suggestions that you are getting in your VS Code or in any other editor. Make sure it is coming from Express, okay, and no, from no other place. Okay, otherwise you will start getting strange errors. Okay, and response, and this will also come from Express. See, I'm getting the fourth suggestion. Okay, response and a next function. Okay, so this is very important when you are creating a middleware. Okay, and what this will return, this will return void. Okay, so because when our middleware execution is done, we will simply call the next function, right? So this doesn't need to return anything, right? So this is the best template of the middleware. Okay, now we will close this core. Okay, and in common I already have a folder called middlewares because I was playing around previously. For your case, you can create a middlewares folder inside common. Okay, and in this middleware folder I will add a file. Okay, I will call it as logger dot middleware.ts. Okay, so again we are following the same convention. Okay, so what this will do, this will do export class logger. Okay, implements I middleware, and if you see we are getting a squiggly here, so it says quick fix and it says implement interface I middleware. So your editor will automatically implement it. Okay, now depending on your scenario what you want to implement. Okay, For now, I'm just going to log the basic request. Okay. So let me just copy this. So console.log, okay, and in a particular format, request.method and request.url. Okay, and what I have to do, I have to call the next method. Now coming back to controller, I will say quick fix and add import to this middleware. Okay, now this use middleware is still throwing error, right? So now let us work on our middleware decorator. So we'll come to core, we'll come to decorators. We already have a request.decorators.ts. Now I'll say new file, okay, and here I will say middleware.decorators.ts. Okay, perfect. And here what I will say, export, okay, function use middleware. And what this will take, this will take the middleware function. Okay, so I'll say middleware of type function. Now what this will do, this will return the decorator function, right? Function, okay, we will say target of type any, okay, and property key of type string. Now if you remember this get decorator, right? So what we were doing in this get decorator, so if I show that one, what we were actually doing, we were creating a route instance, and there we were attaching the method, the route path and the property key, right? Now in the same line, when somebody adds a middleware, okay, what I want to do, I want to add another property here, that is the middleware's array, right? So let us work on that. So first what I have to do, I have to update this route. So this will take a middleware array, okay, middlewares, and this is going to be a function array, right? Okay, so now as soon as I do this, it will give me squiggly. I can mark this as optional because I don't have to compulsorily pass the middleware, right? Say here I am not passing any middleware, right? So I'll keep this as optional. Okay. Now what will happen when we try to read the same property here? Okay. So here let me copy this one, okay, and I'll paste it, okay, and I will import routes. Then if I just do a simple console.log and I will say routes from middleware, right, as simple as that. And here I will say console.log, okay, I will say routes, okay, and I'll come to book controller and I will import this one, okay. So now when I check my console, see everything is working, okay. Now what I want to do here, I want to use this middleware on top of this function as well, right, on the get all books, okay. So if you see here, what will happen, first this function will be executed, okay, then this function will be executed. Now they are in the same route, okay. So what will happen on these routes, so first this function will be added, then on the second log, of course this function will be there, and then this function value will also be added, right? So let me show you. So if you see here, routes from middleware, so first what value we get, we get one handler or one array item with this handler get all books. And second time when I run this, of course this was already added, on top of this was added, right? So because why we are doing the push, right? So if you see here, we are taking the current routes, okay, that means it will pick this current route and then it will add or push another value, right? So that's what happens when the middleware is called second time, right? Now how we will know that for which route this middleware function is called? So all we have to do is filter based on this property key. See, we have the handler, right, which is get all book and get all books by id, and we have a property key here, right? So what we have to do, we have to filter, okay. So I will say const current route equals to routes dot find. Okay, so r dot handler equals to property key. Okay, so instead of routes, okay, I will log the current route. Okay, so now if you see routes from middleware, now this is no longer an array but a single object, right? So now what I can do on this object, okay, if you remember this routes, okay, it has another property called middlewares, right? And we have a middleware function. So all we have to do is to add that particular middleware to this current route. Okay, so let us do that. If okay, current route dot okay middleware, that means if it is already defined, okay, so what we can do, current route dot middleware, okay, dot push, okay, what we will push, middleware function. Okay, and if this is not the case, that means we don't have the middleware, what we can do, current route, okay, dot middleware equal to okay array, and it will have only one item, that is the middleware, right? So if it already has n number of middlewares, it will just push to that. If this is the first time that we are registering the middleware, okay, what we will do, just one array item, and that it will have the middleware, right? So if we now see the log, if you see routes from middleware, it has path and method and handler and middleware, right, the class logger, right? Now if I show you just for example, if I add it twice, what will happen, see, the get book by id, which has one decorator middleware, it has only one item in this middleware, right? But the get book by id, see, it has two entries, right? Why? Because for the first entry this get executed, right, and the second entry this get executed, right? So I will remove one of this log and I will save. Okay, now if I print the route, okay, what what value we will get, see, this is the routes. Okay, here what we will get, the first array. Now we are not doing the filtering, we are on the base array, right, the routes array. So here we have the middleware, and in the second function, the second time when the function gets executed, okay, that get executed because this function is added twice here, right? So for the first one, this is the log. For the second one, it includes this log plus this log, right? So that's why we have two array items. Okay, now what we are going to do with this information, we are going to use this in app.ts, right? So let me do one thing, I can remove this controller, okay, and I can now remove this middleware, okay, and what I have to do, I have to put it in metadata. So what I can do, I can do this. So if you see request decorator, what we were doing at the end, we were pushing it back to the metadata, right? So here also we updated the routes, okay, and here what we will do, we'll update it back to the metadata. Okay, then I will come to app.ts, okay, and if you see here we have this route, okay, this route has method, path and handler. Now what else we have, we have route dot middlewares, right, we have the middlewares. So now we can use this one. Okay, so where we use it in between the path and the handler. So if you see the example here, okay, so in this scenario where you would have added, this is the path, this is the handler, right? And if you remember the other typical express app, so what we do, we call some logger function here, right, like this. So this gets executed as a middleware, right? If you are not sure about this, I have already made course on Express, maybe you can once check that out, right? So this is how we add lots of middlewares, right? So maybe error handler middleware, right? Like that we can add multiple middlewares here, right? So how can we get the middleware? So when I come inside the route, I can say const middleware, middlewares equals to route, okay, dot middlewares or an empty array, right? Now what is this actually? So these are the list of middleware classes, right? So this I cannot execute as a function, right? But how can I execute this as a function? So for that, what I will do, I'll say middleware executable function equals to middleware dot map, okay, map, okay, and this will take a function, okay, and here I will say middleware, and what will be the type of this one? This will be type of new, okay, I middleware. Now what does this mean? This means this map function will take a class which has a implementation of I middleware interface, right? Now what I can do, this is just the class name, right? So if you remember here, the controller, it was just the name. To get the instance, what we have to do, we have to use it from the container, right? Now if I have to say const middleware instance equals to container dot get, okay, this middleware, right? And if we have to use this, okay, what we have to do, we have to come to our middleware, okay, and we have to decorate it with service decorator, right? This should come from type dependency type di, right? Then only this container dot get will get the instance from the di container, right? And here what we will return, middleware instance dot use, right? See, we got the use. Why we got the use? Because we defined this middleware as a class that inherits from I middleware, right? So now this middleware is an executable function, okay, or list of executable functions. So I should mark it as plural, okay. And here what I should do, I should spread it dot dot dot, okay, and middleware executable functions and a comma, right? So now what we have done, this functions whatever was there in the use, okay, so if you see this one, this use, okay, now it has come here as middleware executable function, and that is spread here, right? So now the moment of truth. So this is loading, the controller has been loaded, right? Now I will open Postman and I will send a request. We got something back. Now let us check our console. See here, this is the log from, this is coming from the log middleware, right? So I'll show you the log middleware again. What this is doing, request dot method. So that is the request dot method get and the URL, right? So if I run get all books, okay, so if I open this one, this is still get and slash books, right? Now what I can do, I will come here and I will remove this one, okay, from where, from get all books, okay. So now if I run get all books, okay, will I get log? No. Just to prove, okay, I'll show you. I'll run this one. See, I'm getting slash books slash one, right? Again if I run, okay, I get this again, right? Now if I come here and if I run, okay, see, I'm not getting anything, right? So now our middleware setup is complete, okay, but now there is a very big catch, okay. So if you see, this middleware get executed from bottom to top, okay. So this get function will be executed first, okay, and then this middleware will be executed. So in this middleware, if you see, we are assuming that there is a routes. So what if, okay, in this book controller, I do it like this. See, this is also a valid way, right? I cannot force the developer or user of this repository to use this use middleware on top of get, right? So my framework should be robust enough to handle this, right? So now if I save this one, see, everything is crashing all red, right? Okay, so we will fix this one. Okay, so how to fix? So first we will come here, okay, and we have to see if there is a routes already. What we will do, we'll simply add the middleware, okay, and if that is not the case, we will create the route instance, keep everything empty. What are the everything? So everything means the method we don't know, the path we don't know. So we know the handler and we know the middleware. Handler is nothing but the property key, right? So if I don't have a route, okay, in this middleware, let me add that route, okay, and in request.decorator, I can check if the route exists, okay. I'll just set the path and the method. If it doesn't, I will set up everything along with the empty route, okay. If that is confusing, just watch, okay, this will become very clear, okay. So now if you see, if, okay, I'll say routes, okay, if we already have route, okay, I will do all of this and it makes sense. If it doesn't have route, I will say, okay, routes dot push, okay, what we will push, the method. Do we know the method here? No, right? We don't have any way to know the method, so we'll keep it empty, okay. Do we know the path? No, right? We don't know also the path, okay. Do we know the handler? Yes, we know the handler. This is nothing but the property key, okay. And the middleware, this will be the middleware value that we are getting from here, right? So if you already have the route, just add it. If we don't have the route, okay, when we will not have the route, when this use middleware is invoked first, we will not have the routes, because who is adding the routes? The request decorator is adding the routes here, right? So we can add it here also, the same logic, this one, right? We will add it, okay. And here what I have to use, I should use the current route instead of the routes, okay. So just a small correction, okay. If we find the route, current route, then only we will do this, okay. Otherwise we'll push a new route, okay. Now here what I will do, I'll again find the current route, okay. So how can I find the current route? Like this, okay. Now what I can do, if, okay, current route, that means if I have some value, okay, what value I will have? I'll have handler and middleware, right? Now my responsibility is to add these two, method and path, right? So I'll say current route dot method equals to get, and I will say current route dot path equals to route path, okay. And I will say else, okay, and I will cut, okay, and paste it inside, okay. And here what I can do, I can say middlewares as an empty array. So now these two are complementing each other. So if we already have a route, okay, how we will already have a route? Because this guy might have added, right? So it will have the method and the path, okay. So what else we will add? We will add the middleware only, okay. If we don't have, we will push it, okay. When we push it, okay, this guy will find it, and what this will do, this will add the missing property, okay, that is the method and the path. Why? Because we kept these two empty here, right? Great. So now with these two completed, let us check how our function behaves. So if you see, our server is now running properly, okay. So now if I send a request, okay, see, I'm getting the log, okay. So now what we have essentially done, now we have made this independent of the place where we use it, right? And we have added just small tricks. Now let us add one more functionality, middleware at the level of the controller, okay. So something like this. So I will add it here, okay, and I will remove it from all other place. Now what does this mean? It, this use middleware, it should be invoked for all the methods, okay, that are available inside this particular class, okay. So for that, how we will approach? So here what we will do, we will come to this use middleware, okay. Now earlier, okay, earlier it was used on a property, on a method, right? Now it is used on class. So how can we distinguish that? If it is used on class, we'll have the target, but we'll not have the property. If it was used on a method, we'll have the property, right? This is how we can distinguish if it is used on a class or on a method, right? This decorator, right? So here what I can say, okay, if property key, okay, that means this is used, the middleware function is used on a class method, right? And here what I can do, I will cut all of this and paste it here, okay, else, okay. So that means when this property key is not defined, that means this decorator is used on a class, right? So I will say used on a class and not on a property or method, right? Great. So this is very simple. What we will do here, okay, here what we can do, we can define a metadata. So I can say reflect, okay, dot define metadata, and I can say controller middleware, okay, and I can say the middleware value on the target. Now is this going to be enough? Right now there is a possibility that more than one middleware is used here, right? So if we do this, it will override with the latest middleware, right? To prevent that, what we have to do, we have to read the existing middleware, okay. So I'll say const controller middlewares equals to reflect, okay, dot get metadata, and I'll copy this keyword, okay, and here I have to pass the target, right, or an empty array, right? If it doesn't have anything, then what I will do, I'll put this into an array, okay, and I will spread the controller middleware, okay, and on top of that I'll add the middleware, okay. Now we have set up the middleware in this reflection key, right? Now what we have to do, we have to go to our app, and before that let me copy this line, okay. Here inside this controller, okay, I will add this line here. We already have the base path, the routes and the instance, and we are inside this controller loop, right? So here I will use this constructor, okay, to read the metadata, okay. This is the controller middleware. Now what I should do, we already have these middlewares, that is the route middlewares. What I have to do is I have to merge this route middleware and this controller middleware, so that if anything is there in this route middleware, that will be executed, and if anything is there in this controller middleware, that should also get executed, right? So here I can say const, okay, all middlewares equals to, okay, dot dot dot, I'll say controller middlewares and this middlewares, okay, and maybe I should rename it to route middlewares, okay, route middlewares, and here this map should happen on all middlewares. Now let us come to our console and see if there are any error, and it clearly says, okay, identifier not found in container, okay. And if you see, this error is coming because this route middleware, it could be an empty array, right? So here I should have spread this one also, okay. So now if I change this one, see, we are getting the server back, okay. And now when I send the request, see what I'm getting, the log, right? And the same thing will happen here on the get all method, okay. And why this is happening, because here on the book controller I have used this logger middleware at the controller level. So that is the whole idea of how we can implement middleware. Before we proceed any further, if so far you are liking this video, give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, because this is the kind of content I bring on this channel on a regular basis. Now let's continue to the video. In the last video, we completed our middleware setup. Now what we will do next? So here we defined the get decorator that we were using here, right? Now let us define other decorators. What are the other decorators? The post, put, delete, patch, those kind of things, right? Now say for example, if I have to create a decorator for post, if you can think, everything else will remain the same except for this method name, right? So if I can get this method name dynamically from a function parameter, then I don't have to repeat this function each for the other methods, right? Get, post, put and delete, right? So what I can do is I can write a helper function, okay. I will call it as function, okay, create http route, create http route decorator, okay, and it can take the method name as a string, okay, and what this will return, this will return me this particular function, okay. So I will cut and I will paste, and instead of export I will say return, okay, and I can mark this as anonymous function, right? And here instead of this get, okay, what I can use the method name, right? And then what this function will return, see this function, okay, this will return say get as a decorator, okay. So create http route, okay, and this will be get, right? And what I can do, okay, this get should be capital, okay, and I can say export const get equals to create http route decorator, and I'll pass get, okay. So I will copy this many times, not many times, 4 or 5 times, right? So it will be get, okay, post, and this will be put, and I can also add patch, okay, and I can also add delete, right? And here also I will respectively change, right? Okay, now this get decorator, post decorator, everything we have created, right? So now let us add it to our function. I will paste it here, right? Okay, now what I'm doing here, just simple message blocks, okay. As of now we are not dealing with the exact CRUD operations that I'll show you later, but for now we're just trying to stitch everything together, right? So now if I say quick fix update, okay, so it will update the import, and here also and here also, right? Now if we go to our postman and say for example let us come to create book, okay, if I send a request, see what I'm getting, message book created, right? How easy it is now. So now if I come to delete, you will see book deleted, right? And if I come to put method, what will happen? So if you see, we are getting error here. And why is that? Because this put method is also taking a param value, right? Are we passing the param? No, right? So you have to pass the param, and now if I send the request, see, it will work, right? So what we have done, we have added all the http verbs, and based on that http verb we are able to route it properly to the proper handler function, right? See now how easy it has become. All you have to do is write the method and add the proper decorator. Perfect. Now let us go to the next step. Now what is the next step? If you see here, we are setting res.status 201, res.status 200, and JSON book, right? Again res.status 200, okay, res.status 201, and the JSON value, right? If you see, we are repeating this everywhere, okay. What if, okay, what if instead of dealing with this response, okay, if I can simply return the books, okay, if I can simply, okay, return this book of ID, okay, see, wouldn't this be easy for the developer, okay, just to return the value or maybe throw an exception, right? Instead of us dealing with the response.json, okay. But how we will handle, that is the question. Let us see. For that we have to come back to our app, okay, and let me comment out everything. And what I want to show is only this one method, okay, and now this is giving quickly, okay. So let us bring everything back, okay. This is just to show you the example, okay. So now if we see, server is running, okay, and what method we added, we introduced back the get all books, right? So if I come and get all books, okay, it is stuck, right? Why it is stuck? Because here we are not returning proper value, okay. So for now let me return the proper value, okay, res.status 200 and JSON, okay, books, and I will come here and I will rerun this one. So we are getting our value back. Now what is the point of writing, okay, this line, okay, and why did I comment out everything, okay? Now this is to show you one particular pattern, okay. So what is this? This is a handler function, right? And what is the definition of this handler function? It takes a request and response, right? Here we are giving this as the function, Okay, now, okay, can I write in this function, okay, in a different way? Okay, what do I mean by this? So instead of simply attaching this function definition, okay, can I write it like this? Okay, request and response, and then this will become an arrow function. Okay, and we will pass this request and response, right? This is the same thing. I'm just explicitly passing the parameters, and I'm taking the parameters from here, right? And this can be of type request, right? And this has to be of type response, right? And what I have to do, I have to import it here, right, on the Express. So request and response, right? Now can I do it like this? Okay, I will add it to the next line. Okay, and I can say, okay, const result and res dot status of 200 and JSON of result. See, this is valid, right? And can I wrap it in try catch? Okay, so I will cut, okay, paste, and in the catch block I can say res dot status of say 500, and I can say JSON, I can say message, and just a simple message. Okay, something went wrong, and I'll show you how to properly handle this one, right? So now here what I have done, I have changed this rest.status.json from the handler to our main app logic, right? So now all I have to do here is return, okay, books. I don't have to deal with rest.status.json everywhere, right? Now this is handled in a central location. So now if I come here and send the request, okay, this will still work. Obviously this will work, right? Now can I implement the same logic here on the controller? See, this I just gave example for one route, right? We are not going to use this anyway. Okay, so what I will do, I'll uncomment, okay, my controller handler, okay, and here these are the middleware function, okay, and from here I should be able to modify my handler, right? So here what I can do, I can pass request of type request and response of type response, okay, and then this will be a function, and I will cut it and I will paste it, okay, and I can say const result equals to instance, and instead of this bind, now what I can do, I can say request and response, right? And I can say return res dot status of 200, okay, and JSON of result, and I should wrap it in try catch, right? So I will cut this, paste it here, okay, and I will borrow this line and paste it here, right? Now I don't have to use the rest status, right? All I have to do is just return the message, as simple as that. Okay, great. So now let us check our terminal. Everything is working. So now I will come here, send a request. This is working. Now also I'll come here, send a request. This is also working, right? Now if you come to create a book, and if I send a request, see here I'm getting 201. Okay, just keep this in mind. Now I will change this, okay, and I will simply say return, okay, and I'll return this message. Now when I return this message, I'm getting the proper value, but this status is lost. Okay, so what can we do about this? Let us write a helper function, okay, in our core in util. Okay, let me write a new file and I will call it as helpers.ts, okay, and here I will say export, okay, response status code by method type, okay, and I should use a const keyword here, right? Okay, so for get, what should be the status? 200, right? For post, okay, what should be the status? 201, okay, and similarly for put, okay, what should be the status? 200. Let us keep it 200, right? For whatever reason, if you want to change, you can change it here. And for delete, what should be the status? 204, content not found, okay. So this is based on the REST convention, okay, REST API convention, okay. So now I will come here, okay, and instead of saying 200, okay, what I can do, I can say const status code equals to response status code. I'll just copy it, okay, pass it here, right? This is giving quickly, so we will fix it, okay. And from here, which value we have to get? we have to get the value of route dot method. So this is a object, the key are the method, right? So from where we'll get the method? From route dot method. Now I will use this instead of the status code, right? Now if I come here, okay, if you see server is running, okay, now very interesting, we will come here and if you see 201 created, right? Now if you come to delete, we are still getting 201, right? Why is that the case? Because here, okay, we are actually hard coded this return value, right? So what we should do instead, I should copy, okay, and paste, and I should take this message, right, paste it here and remove this. Okay, the same thing I can do here. I can say return, okay, book deleted. Now if I come here, see 204 no content, here also 201, right? Based on this you can customize in whatever way you want, right? So what we have essentially done, we have taken the responsibility of res.status.json from our handler to our centralized app logic, right? So this is perfect. Now let us do error handling. Okay, we have added this try catch here, right? Now say for example this update book, okay, I want to check if the ID that we are getting, that ID exists or not, right? So here what we have to do, we have to get the ID, right? If okay this book ID is greater than books dot length, okay, what we should do, we should throw some error, okay, we should throw some error, throw new error, right? Okay, I can throw this error, but let us introduce different error classes for our framework. So what advantage we will get? We can say throw new, okay, not found error, right? So this will help me in writing better code that is easily understandable, and here I can add different types of log specific to that particular type of error that will help me in debugging, right? Now how to write this error class, right? So for that, inside the core, because this is going to be part of our core framework, okay, here I will add a new folder and I will call it as classes, okay, all the different class that I will be storing here. Okay, here new file, and I can say not found error.ts, or you can say not found .error.ts, right? I leave that convention to you. Okay, so I can say export class not found error, and most importantly it will extend from the error class. Okay, then here I can say public status of type number, okay, and public message of type string, okay, and I'll call the constructor, and this will take the message, right, of type string, right? So if you see, we have to pass a message, right? So say for example book not found, whatever message, right? So I will come here, okay, and I will call super, that will call the parent error class, and it will pass the message, okay, and this dot status equals to 404. Why 404? Because this is the not found class, right? And this dot message equals to the message or the generic message, okay, resource not found, okay, and this message I can mark it as optional, right? And what I have to do here, I have to import it, right? So book not found, okay. Now when you come to our app, here what we can do, we can add different type of handling for each error case. Okay, what do I mean by that? So here I can check, okay, if error instance of, okay, not found error, then can do something here, okay, particular way of handling not found error. So maybe later in your framework you can add unauthorized exception, unauthorized error, right? Based on that you can do some error message or error handling, right, or some log. So that for now I'm not showing it here. For now I'm just showing the example of not found error. Okay, so I can say return, okay, rest dot status, okay, of error dot status, okay, and JSON of error dot message. So anytime not found exception happens, this will return. Okay, for any other type of exception, this 500 will be returned, right? Later you can add, else if, okay, else if error instance of unauthorized error instance, right? So you can then handle it in some particular way, right? So I will save it and I will check the terminal, okay, it is running. Then I will come to, say for example, update book. Why update book? Because on this update book I have added this error handling, right? So I will come here, update book, and I will send a book of id 10. Okay, what will happen when I send id 10? See, books has think only 5 index, right? So when I try to get the 10th index, what should happen? See, not found. 404 not found, right? So this is how you can do error handling. So in the last video we did the centralized error handling as well as the request and response modification. That means we are not using the request and response in the instance. Okay, so that means I am simply returning the final output. Okay, that means this request and this response, okay, we are not using it anymore in our controller, right? This logic we have moved to our central initialize controller logic, right? So let us enhance our framework and even remove the dependency of request and response here in the parameters. Okay, so response we are not using. Now request we are using. We might need it to get the request.params or request.query or request.body or request.headers, right? So these are the few use case where we need the request object. Now what we will do, we will not use the request object itself. We are going to use the decorator pattern. Okay, so I want to introduce few more decorators with help of which we can read the params, the query and the body, right? So this is what I want to achieve. So okay, I'm taking this example because this has a param, URL param, right? So if you see the postman, see this /1 is the param, right? So how we are reading it? We are reading it from request.params, right? Instead, what I want to do is to create a decorator and I want to call it param. Okay, and here I will pass this id. Okay, that means it will parse this id. Okay, and it will give me a variable of type number, right? Or it could be of type string, depends on the use case, right? So for now, let it be number. Why number? Because I have to use it as an array index, right? As per current implementation. Okay, so this is what I want, and maybe instead of id, maybe we can keep it as book id. Right now, why I'm not keeping book ID? Because it will give this duplicate identifier conflict. Okay, so for now, I can keep it ID. What I want to emphasize is this name and this name need not be same. However, this name and this name has to be same, right? Okay, now how can I write a param decorator that will give me the parameter value that is being passed here, right? And it could be anything, right? Number, string, boolean, anything. So this is my target. Okay, so let us see how we can do this. So I will come to my core and decorators, and I will add one more decorator here, and I can name it as http handlers.decorators.ts, right? And I will say export function params. Okay, and what this will return? This will return a parameter decorator. Okay, we have seen class decorator, we have seen method decorator. Now what we are writing here is a parameter decorator, right? Okay, now what value it will take? It will take this key value, right? So I can say key of type string. This will always be string, right? And what will be the signature of this function? This will take the target, okay, property key and parameter index. Okay, so these are the three parameters, okay, that a parameter decorator takes. Okay, so target is the class, right? So this is the decorator. This decorator is used on this book controller class. So this target will be the book controller. Okay, the method is this one, get book by id, which is the property key. Okay, and it will take the parameter index. So it will start from 0. So say for example here I have another parameter name of type string, say for example. Okay, so here what will be the index? Index will be 1. So it is 0 index and this is the first index, right? This we are not going to use, but for now I'll just keep it for example purpose. Okay, so we have the parameter index. So if I do a console.log and if I say target.constructor, then property key, then parameter index. Okay, and what I will do here, I will come, I will do a quick fix, and if you see here I'm not getting option to import. Okay, why is that? Because here I have used params. Okay, it should be param, and here I will say import, and here what I can do for now, let me temporarily comment it out and hard code it to 1, just so that our application works. Okay, it doesn't throw any error, right? So now server is running, so we'll come to postman and we'll send a request. Okay, now if you see, okay, so if you see here, this is the log, right? So this is the target, okay, and this is the parameter key, and this is the index. Okay, why we are getting 1? Because if you see, we are passing it in the first parameter index, right? So this is the 0th and this is the first parameter, right? Now to add this decorator, okay, what information I need? Okay, so I need this data type. Okay, that is the thing that I need. I need this key, right? And what else I need? I need the index, right? So these are the 3 things that I need. Okay, so I will create a type, okay, export type http handler, and it will take index, okay, as number, okay, key as string, and type as string. Okay, so index, okay, key is this key, okay, which is the id or whatever variable we are using here, that one, right? And the type, what is the type? The number. Okay, now if you see, we have the index and we have the key, right? But we don't know the type. Okay, so how to get the type? Again, reflection comes into our rescue. Okay, so I'll say const param type equals to, okay, reflect dot get metadata. Okay, and what metadata? There is a very specific metadata called design param types. Okay, and it will take target and property key, right? So for this target, for the given target, and for the property key, okay, what are the parameter types that we have? Okay, so if I do a console log, okay, we will see its value. Okay, so if I show this one, see what I am getting. I'm getting one function string and one function number. Right now, what are these? So if you see the function, okay, it has 2 parameters. Okay, one is of type string, one is of type number. Right, this is what is being displayed here. Right, so function string and function number, right, which is equivalent to string and number. Right, now from here, how can I find the required data type? Okay, so the required data type is in which index? So 0th index and first index. Now do we have the index? So if you see here, we do have the index, right? So for now, okay, let me remove this because this will create confusion. Okay, and if I say parameter index, okay, and if I log, if you see here, what we are getting? We are getting function number. Right, now I can say dot name, right? So now what I'll get? I'll get number, right? And say for example, if I change this to string, okay, I'll save and I will open. So now what I'll get? I'll get string, right? So essentially what I'm doing, I'm getting the parameter type. Okay, great. So now what I'll do? Okay, now can I add this information simply in the metadata? So there might be a possibility that there are multiple params, and later on we are going to introduce query strings also, right? So before adding anything to the reflection, what I have to do, I have to read if anything is already there in the reflection and then append to that, right? This is the pattern that we have been following. Okay, so what I will do, I will say const existing param equals to reflect dot get metadata, and I'm going to name it as params, okay, on target dot constructor and property key, right? Or it will be an empty array. Okay, and this existing param will be of type http handler array, right? Then existing params dot push, okay, what we have to push? Index is nothing but the parameter index, right? Key is nothing but the key that we are getting from the parameter, okay, this key. And what will be the type will be param type, okay, of parameter index, okay, dot name, right? We have seen this in the console log. Then reflect dot define metadata, and what value we will push? We will push the params, okay, this name has to be same. Okay, what value we will push? We will push the existing params value on target dot constructor and property key, right? Perfect. So what we have essentially done, we have added some information on our reflection. Okay, perfect. So now let us check the console. We don't have any errors, right? So we will come to our app, okay, and here inside this try block. Okay, let me read that information. Okay, so I will say const params equals to reflect dot get metadata. Okay, and we'll get the param, and this will be coming from instance dot constructor. And what will be the property key? So if you see here, this key value pair is based on this constructor and this property key, right? So I have to pass both. So what will be the property key here? Route dot handler, right? So this will be the handler, the property key, right? So if I now do console dot log of params, okay, and if I do a console log, okay, and I send a request, okay, and if I come here, you see we have index 1, okay, id is the key and type is the string, right? So this is one of our parameters. Right now, say for example, okay, if I add one more parameter here on the update book, right? So I will do the same thing. So here I will take this, okay, and I will comment out, and for now I'll just say const book id equals to 1. Okay, this is just to fix the error. Okay, this is not the final code. So if I now send a request, okay, and if we come to our console, okay, this is one value that we are getting, okay, and if I come to the update, okay, here also we will get something. So if you see here, the parameter index is 0, id is the key, and type is the string. Okay, now one more example I can show you. Okay, so add param, okay, and we can call it some value, say for example age, okay, and I can say age of type number. Right now what I have to do, I have to take the age also, just a random example. Okay, so now I'll come to postman, okay, and here I will say 14. Okay, now if I send a request, what will happen? You see here on index 1, okay, we have key as id, type of string, okay, and on index 2 we have key of age and type of number, right? So this is what we want to do. Right now what we can do with this information, we can come here, okay, I will remove this console and I will create a variable, and I'll call it as args of type any array, and it will be empty initially. Okay, now this args, okay, I will pass to our handler function. Okay, so dot args, right? These are the arguments that I'll be sending instead of the request and response. Now what will be the content of this argument? Okay, so to add the content, what I will do, I will say params dot for each, okay, I will say param, and it will take a function. And what will be the type of this param? This param will be of type http handler, right? And this param also is of type http handler array, right? So I will come here and I will say args and which index. Okay, so we'll say param dot index equals to, what will be the value? The value we can get from request dot param and param dot key, right? So param dot key has the id or the age, right? The index defines on which index we are passing that value, right? That means this arg, okay, in its, say for example, first index, okay, what value we are adding? We are adding request dot params dot param key. That means the id request dot params dot id is added into the first index, right? Similarly, on the second index, the age will be added, right? And we will pass that as the arg. Right now if I come here, okay, and if I do console dot log of id and age, okay, let us see what value we will get. Okay, so let us check our console. There are no errors, right? I will come here, get book by id. 1 and 14 are the age and the id and the age, right? So I'll send a request, I'll come to terminal, and if you see I'm getting 1 and 14, right? Perfect. So this is what I wanted. I'm able to inject, okay, the param and the age from my controller initialization controller function, right? Okay, now we will see one more thing. Okay, this age is of type number, right? So if I do type of age, okay, what will be the type of this age? Okay, let's see. So I'll send a request, and if you see, this is coming as string. Even though I'm saying, okay, that it should be of type number, it is still a string, right? Why? Because we have this param dot type, but we are not using it anywhere, right? Now that it's time to use this. Okay, so we'll come to our utils, we'll come to helpers, and we will add a function. Okay, so I will copy paste the function. So but this is transform value. It will take a value of type any, and it will take the type that we want to convert it to. Okay, so for example, it will take the value say 14, and it will pass another parameter called number, right? And we are doing in switch case, and based on that we are doing some transformation. Okay, if it is supposed to convert to string, we are using the string function, and then if it is a number, we are converting it to number and doing some validation. If it is expecting boolean, right, we are doing the boolean validation or boolean typecast, right? Little bit of explicit function definition. So now what I can do here, okay, const raw value equals to this, right? And what value I will assign here? I will assign transform value, okay, raw value and param dot type, right? So whatever type we am passing, it will be converted into that particular type, right? Okay, so we'll go to our console, we'll see there are no errors, right? I'll come to postman, I will send another request, okay, and I'll come to console, and now if I see type of age, that is 14, is number, right? Perfect. So this will do the transformation based on this information, right? Okay, so now let us do some cleanup. Okay, so book controller, I don't need this name, right? And this age also I don't need. Okay, and this also I can do cleanup, and this also I can remove, this also I can remove, and here I can change it to book ID or whatever name you want, right? Again, I want to emphasize this name and this name need not be same, but this key and this key has to be same, right? So I'll pass book ID, right? And I'll copy this line, okay, and I will add it here, right? And I will remove this constant, and I will remove this constant, and this book ID is supposed to be of type number, okay, and I will change this to number as well, right? Why number? Because we are dealing with array index here. This book ID is supposed to be the array index, right? So now I will come to postman, and I will send another request, okay. And why I'm getting 404? So I have to remove this param also, right? Now I'm getting all the value, okay. So now if I send 4, okay, I will get that value, and here if I send 30, okay, I'm getting the validation. So that means I'm able to read the param value, right? This is what I wanted. Perfect. Now what else is pending? The query is pending, right? The query string. What do I mean by query string? So we'll take this example, okay, and here we'll say page equals to 10 and filter equals to true. Just examples, okay. Now my target is I should be able to read this information as well, but these are query strings, okay. These are params, right? These are query strings, right? So we have done it for param, we can do it for query string also, okay. So what I will do, I will copy this function, because this is going to be the ditto same functionality, except for, okay, I will say query, okay, and here I will also say queries, and here also I can say queries, okay. And I'll come to book controller, and here, okay, I can say add query, and what value we have given? We have given page and filter, right? So I will say page, and I can say page number of type string, and I can say add query of filter, okay, and it should be like should filter, and it should be of type boolean, right? Now when I do console.log of page number, type of page number, okay, and should filter, and type of should filter, right? So I should be able to get proper values for this, okay. Later on, based on our use case, we can use this, right? As long as I'm able to do console log, the purpose of this video is served, right? Now the same thing we will here, okay. I'll copy this, okay, and params, so I'll say these are queries, okay, and this will be this queries that we are taking. So we'll take this queries, okay, and queries dot for each, okay, params dot query, and the param key and I'll add it to that particular index, right? And it is the same args, right? So we don't have to do anything, right? Now let us check the console. No errors. I will come to this get all books and I will send a request and it broke, something went wrong. Okay, and why we are getting this message? Okay, see here what I'm doing queries dot for each, right? Now it is expecting for each route, okay, we should have some query methods, right? But if you see for this example we don't have any query methods, right? For this we don't have any param methods, right? So this should always be optional. Okay, so if I don't have any queries, it should not run, right? Or it should run based on condition, right? Or what you can do, you can say or, okay, an empty array, right? This is also, if you want, you can handle or empty array, right? Okay, now if I come and run this one, okay, see I'm getting the value, and when I'm checking the console values, see I'm getting 10 as string and true as boolean, right? So this is what I wanted, so it is coming from this console log, right? So I'm able to get the query values as well as I'm able to get the param values, right? Now one task I leave up to you. You have to write a similar decorator that we can use to get the header value, right? It will be very simple. Okay, all you have to use is a headers, okay, and you have to use query request dot headers. Okay, now in the next video what we can do, we can start with body, right? Now what do I mean by body? So if you see here create book, right, this is not taking a single param or query, right? This is taking a whole body, right? So in the next video we will see how to extract this body, and I'll introduce you to the concept of DTO, that is data transfer object. So in the last video we added this params and the query decorators, right? And we are able to read the params and the query from the URL, right? So this we completed. Now if you see this create book, okay, here we are not passing any query or any params. Here we are passing a full body, right? So now our next target is to be able to read this information, right? Okay, so how can we do that? So again I want to introduce you to another decorator that we will be writing, and this will be the body decorator. Okay, and here I can say a book. Okay, now what will be the type of this book? Okay, that is the question. Earlier param, it could be a number, it could be a string, it could be boolean primitive type, right? But body I cannot represent as a primitive type, right? It has to be of a certain type, right? Now what is that type? That type is called as a DTO. DTO means data transfer object. It's fancy term for having the data type on this handler. Okay, so here I want to have a type of say create book DTO. Okay, now why create? Because in this update also I want to have a DTO, right? Why? Because update is also supposed to take a body similar to this create, right? So I'm naming it as create book DTO, right? So this is nothing but a mapping of this object that we are sending in the body, right? Now let us quickly define this DTO. So what I will do, I'll come to book, I will add a new folder and I will mark it as DTOs. Okay, why a folder? Because create book, update book, both will go into this DTO, right? I'll say new file and I will say create book dot DTO dot ts, right? Okay, so what this will be? This will be a class, right? I will say create book DTO and it will have title of type string, okay, description of type string, ISBN is also going to be of type string, okay, price is going to be of type number, and pages, this is also going to be of type number, right? From where I have added this value, from these values, right? Title, description, ISBN, price, and pages, right? These are the parameters that my API expects, right? So similar to this, I created the DTO, right? So I will come here and I will import this one. Now coming to this body, it is very similar to param and query, okay, except it will not take any key, right? Why it will not take any key? Because it is the full object, right? We don't need any key. Okay, rest everything else will remain the same. That means it should have the data type and it should have the parameter index. Okay, so here I will add the decorator. So I'll say export function body, okay, and it won't take any parameter, right? And it will return the parameter decorator. It will return, okay, target, property key, and parameter index, right? This is very similar to what we have already done here, right? Here, we don't want to do any of this, right? Because we don't need to read the existing body and append to that, right? We will always have only one body object, one body parameter, right? So all I have to do is to store this particular index. Okay, we don't need the key and we don't need the type we can later figure out. Okay, all we want is this index, right? So here I will say reflect dot define metadata, and it will be body index and value will be parameter index with respect to target dot constructor and property key. Okay, this is as simple as this one. Now I'll come to controller and I will import this body decorator. Now I'll come to app and we were doing the parameters and query. After that, we will add some logic. Okay. Now, what information do we need? So first, let us pick out the index. Okay. So const body param index equals to, okay, reflect dot get metadata. Okay, what metadata? Body index with respect to instance dot constructor and route dot handler, right? Then I will say if, okay, body parameter index is not equals to undefined. Okay, just a very basic handling. Why? Because all of my controller method might not have a body decorator, right? So here I am having a body, but in this delete I'll not have any body instance, right? So just to prevent from that, what I'm doing, I'm checking if body index is available, then only do this. Okay, so first the type, this is the DTO type. Okay, what this will be, reflect, okay, dot get metadata, and it will be design param types. This is very similar to what we were doing here, right? So instead of doing it here, I'm doing it there just by passing the body index. Okay, param type of instance and route dot handler. Okay, so this will give me the type. Now from this type, what I have to do, see, this will give me array, right? So that's why we were doing this parameter index, right? Because this param type was giving array of all the parameters that we are passing, right? So maybe I should name it as plural. Now in this array, where is my DTO sitting? On this parameter index, right? So const DTO class equals to types of body parameter index. Okay, so this is how I got the DTO class, right? This DTO class. Okay, then const DTO instance. Okay, now what is this? See, I'll just give you this example. Okay, const DTO instance equals to new. Okay, similar to this new DTO class. Okay, now just to make this example clear, what I can do, create book DTO. Okay, and here DTO instance dot title equals to request dot body dot title, right? And similarly DTO instance dot description equals to request dot body dot description, right? Now this is what I want to achieve, right? Of course this is the hard coded instance, but ultimately this is what I want to achieve. I want to have a DTO instance, and all the properties of that DTO instance should come from my request dot body. Okay, so of course this is manual way, and this will work for create book DTO, but in real world example I can have any DTO, right? So I cannot hard code like this. So for that, what I will do, I'll use a function plain to instance. Okay, and this is coming from class transformer. Okay, so this will help me transform a particular class and an object to a instance of that class, right? So it will take the DTO class and it will take, okay, request dot body. Okay, so this will give me the DTO instance. Okay, and what I can do, I can say args of body parameter index equals to DTO instance. Now we are passing the args here to the controller. Okay, so now if I come here and if I do console.log of book, okay, so this book is now transformed into the DTO instance, okay, which is being added to this args and it is passed here, right? So now let me open the terminal. Okay, there is no error, so I will come here to create book and I will send a request, right? Then I will come to console, and if you see we're getting undefined. Okay, now why is that so? So in Express, when we want to use the body, what we have to do, we have to add a additional .json middleware on Express, right? If you remember, I have shown this in my Express tutorial, right? So what we can do, we can create another private function, and I can say initialize Express. Okay, and here what I can do, this dot app dot use express dot json, right? And whatever other middlewares related to Express that we can initialize here. Okay, and after this Express, this dot initialize Express middlewares. Okay, we will save this one. We will come to console and we will see there are no errors. We will come to postman, we'll send a request. Okay, we'll come to console and we will see create book DTO, right? And it has all the value. See, it has all the values, right? So I will come to my code. Okay, and here I am able to get the book, not only book, but I'm getting this auto suggestion. Okay, this is same as all the value that I'm sending from here, right? So see the advantage that I'm getting the book object along with the types or the type safety, so I can use whichever value I want along with the intelligence, right? Okay, now there is one more thing. So if you see here, the price is supposed to be a number, pages is supposed to be a number. So I want to add validation that the price, okay, should be a number, right? And the price should always be more than one or more than zero, right? The number of pages, that it should be more than zero, right? I cannot say zero pages or minus one pages, right? So I can say title of zero length, right? So I want to add that validation. So now, if you see here, I can pass pages as -1, right? And it will work, right? So I want to add that validation, and this create DTO is the best place to add such validation. And to achieve that, we are going to use our class validator. Okay, so that class validator exposes a lot of validation functions. Okay, so say for example, this title, it should be string. So I can say is string, and this will come from class validator. So all I have to do is just add it on top of our this property, right? Not only that, I can also say length. Okay, length should be 2 to 100. Just an example, right? Based on your need, you can add, you can update these values, right? And similarly, it should be is string. Okay, and for description, I don't want to add any restriction, right? So now it's up to you and your business need what type of validation you want to use, right? So here also I'm going to say is string. Okay, then the price. So this is going to be is number. Okay, and min of 1. Okay, this is my business need. Okay, so it should be minimum more than 1. And similarly page also, minimum it should have a 1 page. Okay, so I have added this validation. Now if I send a request, it has still not prevented this, right? Ideally, we should have some kind of error, right? Pages cannot be -1, right? Okay, so just adding these decorators is not enough. Okay, we have to add the validation. Okay, here in this DTO instance. Okay, let me show you. So after creating this DTO instance, we will say const error equals to validate. Okay, and this validate will come from class validator. Okay, it will validate DTO instance. Okay, with respect to what? With respect to these parameters, right? And if you see here, what this is returning, this is returning a promise. Okay, so we will await. Okay, and where we can await only on a async function, right? So where is this function? See, this function is this one, right? So I'll mark this as async. Okay, so now I can await. Okay, and if okay errors, or I can say, since this is an array, so I can say errors. Okay, errors dot length, okay, is greater than 0. That means there are some error. Okay, I will create a variable and I'll call it as formatted errors, because this error object, because this error variable is a array, right? So we should be able to map and create a meaning out of that, right? So errors dot map. Okay, error return. Okay, property error dot property, and constraints equals to error dot constraints. Okay, I'll show you what each of this means. Okay, and let me correct the spelling. Okay, and if this is the case, we can say return res dot status of error 400 dot json message. Okay, you can give a message, say for example validation failed. Okay, and errors of type formatted errors. Okay, then we will save this. Okay, we will come to our postman and we will send a request. See, message validation failed. Okay, errors property is which one? This property page, and what it is saying, pages must not be less than 1. Okay, and similarly, if I change the title length to only 1 character, right? If I send this, see, we are getting two properties. Title length must be longer than or equal to 2, and pages must be less than, pages must not be less than 1, right? So we are getting this value, these errors, right? Now what you can do, instead of returning, okay, what you can do, you can throw a bad request error, and you can create a class for that, right? Similar to what we were doing here, right? Throw new bad request error and you can pass those values, right? I leave that to you just as a task, right? And for the demonstration purpose, I'm keeping it like this. Okay, this is easy to read and you can understand it very easily when you check the repository, right? Now, if I fix all my issues, okay, what you can do, it will allow me to send the request properly, right? And I'll be able to log and I'll be able to do whatever I want, right? Because I'm getting the intelligence. So I can put it to database, I can do a log, whatever value I want, I can do that with this. So I'm able to get the body as well, right? So now we don't have the dependency of request and response, right? And this ID to be deleted, this also expects a ID, right? So I can use params. Okay, so if I come here, I don't need this request response and router, right? So now this dependency is gone and maybe this is also not needed, right? Perfect. So now my controller looks very clean, right? I have the necessary decorators, post, and inside that I have body, right? Put, and I have params. So in the last video, we completed our query, param, and body decorator. Now let us move to next concept, that is adding a service layer. So the controller is only responsible for dealing with HTTP related functionalities like reading the params, no query, and body, but it will not have any business logic. Okay, so if this guy is not having any business logic, then who should have? The business logic should be dealt with a service layer. Now, what is a service layer? This is nothing but just a class that will be injected into controller, and that service will have all the relevant method that this controller needs. Okay, so let me show you how. So we have books.controller.ts. I'll add one more file, book.service.ts. Okay, and this will be export class book service, and most importantly, it will be decorated with this service decorator that will come from typedi, so that we can add it in our dependency injection container and then we can inject it into our controller. Okay, now what method it needs? It needs equivalent method for each of the HTTP handler. Get all books, right? Get book by ID, create book, update book, and delete book, right? So let us see. Now before I do that, what I will do, I will take this book constant that is currently working as our database, okay, and I will paste it here. Okay, now this guy will deal with everything that is related to books functionality. Okay, of course this will throw error, but we will fix it. Okay, so first function is get all books, right? And what this will return? This will return books, right? This books it will simply return, right? Get book by ID, okay, and it will take ID of type number, okay, and return books or ID, right? And can we do some validation? So if ID is greater than books dot length, okay, throw new not found error, okay, and I can say book not found. Okay, now the create book, right? Create book, and this will take a book of type. What will be the type of this one? The create book DTO. And what I will do? Books dot push. Okay, this book update book. Okay, so this will take one ID of type number and book of type what? We'll say update book. Okay, DTO. Now we don't have this update book DTO, right? So let us introduce. Now you might be asking, okay, so what is the difference between create book DTO and update book DTO? In our example, there is no practical difference, right? But there could be scenarios where the create entity or the create DTO and update DTO might be different, right? So for example, it's a user object, right? So say for example, we want to use the uh, we want to set the user id and password, right? So create book DTO will have the user id and password field. Say for example, our business constraints tells that the user id cannot be updated once it is created, right? So in that case, the update user DTO, it will not have the user id field, right? But the create user had the user id field, right? So it is always a good practice to keep your entities separate between create and update and no other functionalities based on the need, right? So here I will add a new file and I will say update book.dto.ts, and I will for now, okay, I will copy it, okay, I will paste it and I will rename it, okay. So I'll say update book DTO. Now I will come here and I will update, okay, and here also I will do the same validation. And what I can do, I can do books, okay, of id equals to the given book, and I will return the new book. And here also I should return the book, okay. Then coming to delete book by id, it will take id as number, okay. And here also we have to do this validation, right? And I will say books dot splice id and 1. So this will remove that particular given id index, okay. Now coming to book controller. So here I will introduce the constructor, okay. And in this constructor, what we can do, okay, so before this we'll say private, okay, book service of type book service, okay. And from this constructor we'll take the book service which will be of type book service, and this dot book service equals to book service, right? Now we are following this pattern, right? We'll create the instance, and in the constructor we'll take that instance and we'll assign it, right? Now there is a shorthand for doing this, the same thing, okay. So here I can say private book of book service, and I can mark it as read only, okay. So this is the same thing, right? Now here I will remove all this log, okay. Here I will return, okay, this dot book service dot get all books, right? And here also what I will do, return this dot book service dot get book by id, and I'll pass the book id, okay. Similarly here also this dot book service dot create book, and I'll pass the book instance that is coming from body. Now I will remove this logic, okay. Return, okay, this dot book service update book, okay, and the book id. And if you see here, we also have to get the body, right? And this body will be of type update book DTO, right? And we will pass the book, and this should be book ID, right? And here we can say updated book or new book, whatever you want to update, use the variable name. Let me fix the spelling, okay? And I will pass the updated value, okay. And here also this dot book service dot delete book, and we'll pass the book ID. Perfect. So we will come to our console. There are no errors, okay. Then we'll open Postman and we will run everything else, okay. So get book by id, okay. So now here I will add a body, okay. And if you see book id 4, price is for 258, right? So I will change it to 4 and I will update it to, I will copy, okay, I will paste, and here I will say 300, right? So now if you see we are getting 258. Now if I update, Okay, now this is giving 300, and if I come here, see, now it is updated to 300, right? So our logic is working. Okay, so we will create a book. Okay, and what we can do, let us delete a book. So we can delete book, right? So now if you see, 1 2 3 4 5 values are coming. So now how many books are there? 1, okay, 2 and 3 and 4. So 4 books are remaining, right? So with this we have added a service layer. This service layer will in turn call the repository methods, okay, that we will see later. Now I want to introduce you to one more concept. Now we are going to write a config service. Okay, now what is the config service? So now we are hard coding the port number, right? Ideally we should read it from some kind of environment variables. Okay, now to read it from the environment variable, I can say process.env.port, right? And of course this will work. But when you go to a real application and in production scenarios, it is not always that we are going to read from environment variables. Okay, sometimes there are secret manager service, from there we have to read, right? And there are other service from which we can read. It could be reading from a encrypted JSON file also, right? So me always hard coding the port number to get from process.env is not correct, right? So for this I need a config service, and that config service will read that value from for me, right? When I am saying this dot config, okay, service dot get, and I want to get port, okay, and I want to pass a default value, right? Now this is the job of this config service, to get the value for me. If it is getting from process.env, or if it is getting from secret manager, or it is reading some database value, it is the responsibility of this config service. Okay, of course in our example we're still going to use process.env, but this is the abstraction that we are adding, so that later we can change it to read from a database or a secret manager instead of process.env, right? So that is the whole idea. Okay, so where we will add, so we'll come to core classes, and here I want to add a new file, and I want to say config service.ts, right? And it will be export class config service. And what we have to do, we have to decorate it with the service decorator, which should come from type di, right? Then only it will be part of dependency injection and we can inject, right? Now it should have 3 methods. Okay, get string, okay, and it will take the key of type string and default value of type string, and it should return a string value, right? Okay, and similarly get number. Okay, so the key is of type string, okay, default value will be of type number, right? And it will return a number, right? Now what I'm doing here, see, here get config, it is supposed to get me a port number, right? And it should be of type number, right? I'm defining a explicit function that will give me a numeric value, so that I don't have to do any typecasting here. Because when you are reading value from process env or some other source, right, there is a high chance that it will be not in the desired data type, right? It will be our responsibility to convert it to the needed data type, right? So get number, of course the key is a string, right? So this will always be a string, okay, and the default value will be number in case of we are trying to read number, right? And the similar value, okay, we will have for boolean, right? So I will update. Okay, now coming to the string part, I will say const raw value equals to process.env and the key, right? So if you see here, key will be port. So what I'm doing, process.env dot port, right? If, okay, raw value equals to null, or raw value equals to undefined, then return default value. Okay, else return the raw value, right? And here, even if you don't write else, it will work, right? Because anyways, we are returning this, right? So just to make it explicitly clear, I am giving the if else condition, right? Similarly, get a number, right? So the raw value will still be the same, okay? And this condition will also be the same, okay? Otherwise, we'll come to else block, okay? Then const result equals to number of raw value, okay? Now, if okay by any chance is nan the result, okay, what we will do? We will return the default value, okay? Otherwise, we will return the result, right? Of course, you can optimize this, right? The if else condition. Now, for boolean, what we will do? See, this part will still remain the same. In the else part, what we can do? We can say if, okay, raw value equals to true, okay, return true, and this will be string true, right? And here, if okay, raw value equals to false, okay, return false, okay. Otherwise, return boolean of raw value, right? Now, coming to our app.ts, okay. So this will be get number, right? Now this config service doesn't exist, right? So we will make it exist. So we already have this book controller, anyways we are not using it, right? So for now let it be there, okay. I'll add a comma, I'll say private read only, okay, config service, and this will be of type config service, right? Now I'll save this one, and let us see, there are no errors, okay. We'll come to console, and the server is running, okay. Now we will come to our folder structure, our folder tree, okay. And here I will add a new file, and I'll call it as .env, okay. And I will say port equals to say 7000 for now, okay. Now coming to config service, is this going to work? No, okay. Why not? Because we have to import, okay, .env from .env, okay, and .env dot config, right? So we have to add this config method, right? So now it will start reading from this port, this file, okay. So I will come to terminal, okay, and I will cut this one, cancel this one, okay, and I will say clear. And before clear, if you see, it has already picked up the new server port, right? So I'll say clear, and I'll say npm run dev. Now if you see, it is running on port 7000, right? So that means our config service is able to pick the config from environment variables, right? So I will change it to 8000, change it to back to 8000, okay, and I will do a restart, okay. So now it is again running on port 8000, and if I send a request, right, it will work, okay. Maybe another book, okay, code of shadows, right? So we are getting the book value back. So our server is running properly. And where we are going to use, of course we are using it to read the and port number. Later we are going to use this config service to read the database connection related information, right? Host, username, password, database port, and everything, right? And we can use it in any other place from where we are supposed to read environment variables. So in the last video, we completed our service layer. And in that video, I said that this service layer is ultimately responsible for calling the repositories. Now, let us start implementing repositories. So what repositories will do? They will create a interface between our service and our database. So for each database table, we will create a entity class, and that will be mapped to a database table. And also I will show you how to create migration, how to run migration, and how to revert migration, and what advantage does this migration give us. So we are going to use Postgres database with typeorm, right? So let us start. So first thing what I have done, I have created a .env file, and here I have added all the database related environment variables, right? DB host, DB port, username, password, and the database name. So for your case, you can change these values accordingly, right? Now coming to the database, if you see here, I have created a database called library. Okay, and it is currently empty. So if you go to schema and table, see there are no tables, right? Even if I refresh, there are no tables, right? So we will create tables from migrations. Now to start with this Postgres and TypeORM, what we will do, we will create our first data source. Okay, data source means it will have all the connection related information to our database. So if you see here, I already have a data folder. Inside this folder, what I will do, I'll create a new file and I will name it as pg data source .ts, right? So why I'm storing it in a different folder, because there is a chance that there might be multiple data sources. So this is pg data source. We might have a mongoose or mongodb related data source. We might have a redis, we might have elasticsearch, right? So all the data, so all the data configuration information will sit here. So what I will do, of course, it will be an export class, and I'll say app data source. You can name it whatever you want, right? And this should extend from data source, which will come from type ORM, right? Then I will create a constructor, and here I will inject the config service that we created in last video, right? And I will mark this as read only. Okay. And here I will call the super function. What this super will do, the super will call this data source constructor and it will pass the required information. Okay. Now, what are the required information? So first information is type. Okay, what type of database, right? So this is going to be a Postgres database, right? Then host. Okay, so from where we will get the host? We'll get the host from config service. Now, can I use this .config service? Okay, I cannot use this because this can only be used after super has been called, right? So here I don't have to use this super, so I can simply say config service dot, okay, get what? This is get string, right? And what we will get, so if you see, we will get db host, right? And what will be the default value? So it will be localhost, right? Because if you remember, this value expects a default value, right? Now, what else? We need the port, right? So I can say config service dot get, this will be number, right? db port, or it will default to 5432. That is the default port for Postgres, right? Then username. Okay. So similarly, config service dot get string. Okay. I will say db username, and the default value will be empty string, right? And now since these are username and password field, be little careful on what you are adding the default value, right? Don't expose even the dummy default value in your code base, right? So config service dot, okay, get string, and I will say db password, okay, and empty value, right? Then database config service dot get string and db name, right? So which is this db name? This database name, right? So I will update it here. And what is the default name? The default name will be library, right? Okay. So these are the basic connection information, but this needs few more information for us to be able to run the migrations. Okay, I'll tell you what that means. But for now, add some more key value pair into this. Okay, so we will have a list of entities, that is an array. So entity is nothing but a class that has few decorators that will come from type ORM. Okay, and they will map to a database table, right? So once we start creating entities, we have to come and add it here, right? Then migrations. So this means where we are going to store our migrations. Okay, I'll explain you what is the migration. Okay, so this will be dir name. That means I'm now inside this pg data source. So this dir name will give me slash data. right? Now what I want to do is I want to have a migration folder in my src, right? So what I have to do, I have to take this current directory, I have to come one step up. Okay, so if I'm in data source, when I come one step up, I'll be inside src folder, right? Then I will have a migrations, okay, slash, that means I'll have a migrations folder, okay, and inside that whatever is there, okay, it could be .ts or .js extension, use that as your migrations. That means on this src, okay, we'll have a migrations folder, and inside that whatever files are created, consider that as migration. Okay, that's what it means. Then synchronization, so I'm going to keep it false. Now what is the meaning of synchronization? So if you keep this true, and you should never keep this true in production. So if it is true, what will happen? It will synchronize your code and your database. That means if you change anything in your entity and you save it, it will be immediately reflected into the database, right? But we don't want that. We want to go through the route of migrations. Okay, so I'm keeping synchronization false. Maybe if you want, you can keep this true in your dev environment and just see how it behaves. Okay, and logging. Okay, logging, I'm keeping it as true. So what this will log? So these are entities, right? We are not going to write directly any SQL statement. So this will print us the SQL statement that this ORM frameworks internally runs. Okay, so this is usually handy when we are doing the development or any debugging to see what queries are being run and to see if there are any performance or any indexation issue or anything, if you want to debug on that, right? Now what we will do, export default. Okay, now we have to do one more thing. This app data source, we have to make it part of our di container, right? So what I will do, I will say service. So once I add this service decorator, this app data source is now available in my dependency injection container, and later I'm going to use this app data source to generate repositories for me. Okay, and these repositories will have all the CRUD operations like find all, create, update, and delete. Like those operations are available. Okay, so now what I can do, export default. Okay, container dot get, okay, app data source, not app data source, right? So I'm adding it to the container, and I'm exporting an instance of the container. Okay, we have our data source configuration completed, right? Now what we have to do, we have to inject it into our app.ts, right? So that on the startup, okay, it will run this function. So where we will add this, so first let's add a method, okay, private initialize data source. Okay, and we have this app data source which is available in our di container. So what we can do, we can inject it, right? Private read only, okay, data source of type app data source. Okay, now here I will add a try catch block. Okay, and on try, what I can do, await this dot, and if you see here I'm using await, so I should use async. Okay, so I'll say private async. Okay, this dot data source dot initialize. So what this will do, this will initialize the connection for me, right? And below that I can say console dot log database connected successfully, right? Successfully. Okay, and if there are any exception, okay, I'll say console dot log, and I'll say failed to connect to db, and console dot log will say the error message will try to print. Okay, and what we can do, process dot exit with a one status code, right? That means this process exited abruptly, right? If it was 0, that means this process ended gracefully or after completing its required task, right? Now since connecting to the database is a very important functionality, and our app won't work if it is not connected to the database, so that is a good idea to exit the process here itself, right? Now where I should call this, I should call this on the start method, right? So I'll mark it as async, and I will add a console.log, and here I can say connecting to database dot dot dot, okay, and await this dot initialize data source, right? So it will say connecting, then it will come here, okay. If it fails, process will exit, okay. If it doesn't fail, it will read the port number and it will start listening on the particular port, right? Okay, so let us save this one. Let us come to terminal and see what is the status. So if you see, database connected successfully and server is running on port 8000. So we are able to connect to our database successfully. Now, next thing what we will do, let us create our first entity. Okay, so we have a book entity, right? So if you see the create book, okay, what value it expects? Okay, so it expects title, description, ISBN, price, and pages. Okay, so we'll create entities, okay, which has similar properties in the class as this JSON, but we'll add one more property, that is the ID field, right? So let us come to our VS Code, and here on book, okay, we have controller, we have service. Here I will add one more file and call it as book.entity.ts. Okay, so here what I will say, export, okay, class book, okay, and very important, this extends base entity, okay. This base entity will come from typeorm, and this is all the magic that will do, that will convert this regular class into a entity class, right? So I will say id, okay, of type number, and what else we have, title of type string, we have description of type string, and we have ISBN, which is of again type string, we have price, which is of type number, and we have pages, and this is also going to be of type number. Okay, so I have created the book entity. Now is this enough? Does this define a entity? So the answer is no. Why not? Because we have to use few more decorators, okay, to explain it to the type ORM that how this book entity is going to behave. Okay, so first what we have to do, we have to decorate this with the entity decorator. Okay, that means this book, okay, is now an entity. Okay, now we can pass a value, that what will be the table name corresponding to this entity. Okay, so we'll say books. Okay, now you might ask, is type ORM not smart enough to convert this book into this books plural string, right? So sometimes it will do, okay. For example, it is book, so it will convert it to books table, right? But say for example we have city, right? So what we want, we want cities like this, okay. But type one, what this will do, it will do like this, cities, right? So we have an option here to specify the table name corresponding to this entity, okay, or whatever name you want, right? You can say, you can give your company name, right? So library underscore books, right? So you can do it like this also, whatever you want, okay. Now this ID, okay, it is supposed to be the primary key, right? Now how can we define it as a primary key? So I can say add primary generated column, right? So now this will treat this as a primary key, okay. So let me take some space so that it will be easy to explain, okay. Now this title is what? Title is nothing but a column, right? And what about description? This is also going to be a column, right? And ISBN, okay, column, and you can pass certain properties to this, okay. So one property I want to use here is unique true. That means in my database, I don't want to have two books with the same ISBN, right? That violates the purpose of having a ISBN, right? So this is going to be a unique key. So you can pass such properties or the configuration properties here, right? At this is also going to be a column, okay? And here I will say decimal, right? And here also I can say column, okay, and type of int, right? So pages will be integer, price will be decimal, okay, ISBN is going to be unique. So by default this is string, right? So I don't have to do it like this, right? So it is by default considered as string, okay. Okay, now our book entity is completed. Now our entity is created. Then what we will do? If you remember, in this data source, we have this entities array, right? So here we will add this book entity. Now we will come to this book entity and let us discuss about migrations. So we have to generate a migration. Okay, what is a migration? So migration is nothing but a SQL statement, okay, that has a up and a down function, okay. So whatever changes we are doing in our code, be it creating a entity or be it updating a column or be it changing a column type, any modification or creation in our code, okay, ultimately it has to be done as a SQL statement in our database, right? So here if I'm creating a book, it should be a create book statement in the database, right? So to create that particular SQL statement, we create a migration. This migration will have the SQL statement inside that, and when I run the migration, it will check the database. It will automatically knows what migrations have already run and where and which migration have not run, and it will take those migrations, essentially the SQL statement, and it will execute in the database, right? That means we don't have to go to the database and change any columns manually. We will change it in our code. We'll generate a migration out of that, and when the migration is run, okay, the same SQL changes will be done on the database. Okay, now what advantage we get? Say suppose we have done some changes and we created a migration out of that. Now other developers in your team, when they will check out the code or the branch in which you are working, or if you have merged it to main, they will take that branch. They will also have the migrations that we have created. Now all that they have to do is to run the migrations. Now your SQL changes are now versioned, okay, and it can be rolled back and it can be shared with your team through the source control, right? And the same thing can happen on different environments, right? Say for example you are in dev environment and you created few migrations. You ran the migration into the dev database, okay, you checked everything is working. Now you will push that dev to higher branch, okay, let's say main branch. Now in main branch you will have also the same set of migrations. The same set of migrations can be directly run on the main database or your production database. If something goes wrong, you can roll back and run the migration, so it will revert all the changes. So we can version control the SQL statement or the SQL changes that we want to eventually make into our database, plus it will be shared through repository throughout the team members, right? So that's where migration comes into picture, okay. So how do we generate migration? Okay, so typeorm gives us the command, okay, but we are not going to run this command again and again. What we'll do, we will add it in package.json, right? So let me paste it and I will explain you. So here I have three commands: migration generate. So what this will do, this will generate migration from entity, okay, then migration up, okay, and migration down. So it has a npx command, and this type ORM exposes this migration run, and from where it will pick the data source from this data source, right? This PG data source, right? That's why we exported this data source, the instance of this particular data source, right? Because this will be used by this migration run command, right? And where how it will know where are the migrations. So here we have already told him we have already told the ORM that this is where you should look for migrations, right? So we have migration run and we have migration reward. All of this will happen with respect to this data source, right? So wherever this data source is pointing, okay, this host or local host or with the credentials available with this username, it will run these migrations, right? So for now, let us first generate our migration and then I will show you how the migration look and what we can do next. So I will open a terminal, okay, and here my server is running. Okay, I have opened another terminal instance, okay, and here npm run, okay, migration generate dash dash and src, okay, migrations, and we will give it a name, right? So book entity init, that means generate a migration inside src migration, and the name should be book entity init, right? So I will hit enter. So if you see migration, okay, and it has given me a path, so it says src migration and some timestamp, and migration init has been successfully created, right? Has been generated successfully, right? So we will come and see this. So if you see here, we have migrations and we have a book entity in it, right? This is the name, and it has a up command and it has a down command, right? So what is this up command? So this has the create statement, right? Create table, book, ID, title, and every other field, okay, that I have added in the entity. Okay, that has come here. And if you see unique ISBN, right? Because I have added the ISBN as a unique column, right? So we have this command, right? Okay, so now migration is generated. So what next? So now if you see the table, okay, we don't have anything. Even if I do a refresh, I don't have anything. I don't have anything, right? So now I will come here. I will clear this and I will say npm run migration up. Okay. So if you see, it will create, it will compare the current schema and it will do some validation and it will create a transaction and it will run the create book statement, that is the up statement, right? And it will say executed successfully. This migration has been executed successfully, right? So now let us come to our database and we will do a refresh. So after doing a refresh, you will see the books table is created and another table called migrations is created. Okay, so if I show you, select star from migrations. Okay, so if you see, it has the timestamp in which the migration name that has been created, right? So what this table does, it keeps the track of all the migrations that has been run and that is yet to run, right? So when you say npm run migration, it will check from this table which migrations have already run and which are yet to be run, right? So now if you see the book, okay, columns, you can see all the columns that were created, right? This is coming directly from our entity. Okay, now if you run, okay, down, what will happen? It will drop that particular table, right? So now if I come here and if I refresh, okay, what will happen? Only migrations table is pending, okay, and the books table is gone, right? Now if I run this one, see, it has reverted the migrations table also, right? Now a word of caution, you should never directly add any statement or update any statement in the migrations table, and similarly you should not update anything manually on this migrations folder. Okay, don't run anything here. If you want to update something, you update the entity and generate another migration. Okay, let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, so here let me run this command again, the migration up. Okay, let me have the database. Okay, then say you want to update something. Okay, so here you want to have the author name also. Okay, so column, okay, and author name, and this is going to be of type string, right? Now you should not come and update anything here on this migration. Okay, what you should do instead is you should generate one more migration. Okay, so clear, and so this is the migration. Okay, book, and you have to give a name, right? So entity update author name, right? And before I run this migration or create this migration, so here let me refresh. Okay, so now we have the books field back, and here if you see the columns, what we have: id, title, description, isbn, price, and pages, right? And let me show you the migration. We have one migration here, right? So I will come here and generate another migration. Okay, so if you see this folder, this is the entity in it. Okay, here what we have what we have done, we have created this migration, right, with the update author name. So what it is doing, it is doing alter table. Okay, add author name, right? And we have the down option also, right? Now what we have to do, we have to take this migration. Okay, and we'll say migration up. Okay, so it will run that particular SQL statement for me, right? Now if you come to database and if you do a refresh, you see now you're getting author name, right? And if you check the migrations, it will tell you which migration has been executed, right? So every time you have to update something, update in the entity, generate a migration, and run the migration, right? Now similarly, if your fellow developers they want, okay, they will take a, so ultimately you will commit this to a repository, right? So they will take a pull. Okay, they will have n number of migrations. Now they don't have to generate. Okay, you have already generated and you have to, and we have pushed the migrations folder, right? Other developers or in other environments, what you have to do, we have to just we have to run this migration up. Okay, now our database is ready with migration and we have our entity created, right? Now let us go to our service. So in service, if you see, we are using this constant data point, right? So now we will not use this one. What we will do, we will take a instance of that entity, generate a repository out of it, and then do all the CRUD operation on that, right? So let us start that. So here I will take a private instance of the book repository. Okay, so, and what will be the type of this one? The type of this one will be repository of type book. Okay, and we have to import this one. Now in the constructor we will inject the app data source, right? So I'll say private read only app data source of type app data source, right? Now this dot book repository equals to app data source dot get repository of type book. Okay, so what we have done, we have initialized this book repository, and from where we are getting that repository, we are getting that repository from app data's function, that is get repository, and we are passing this book entity. That means this repository function will create a book repository and assign it to this value, right? Now what we will do for get all books, so we will say return, okay, this dot book repository dot find without any condition. Okay, so this will do, this will find all the books. Okay, and what we have to do, we have to mark this function as async. Okay, and let me mark all this function as async before I do any more update. Now what I will do for get book by id, I will say const book, okay, equals to await this dot book repository find one by, okay, and id, right? So this will find one by this id, right? If book equals to null, that means this particular id doesn't exist, right? So I'll say throw new not found error, right? And I'll pass a message book not found. If you want, you can give more details, right? Then if we find the book, then what we will do, we'll simply return the book, as simple as this one, right? Now what we will do for create book, const new book equals to this dot book repository dot create, okay, and create what? The book that we are getting from the request, that is the create book DTO, right? Then return this dot book repository dot save and new book. Okay, so we will save this one. We'll create the object. Till now this is in memory, right? This will not go to database. Once we do save, then only it will go to the database and we'll get a response. Okay, now update book. Okay, so for update book, this two line we will copy. Okay, we'll borrow from the get book by id function. Okay, so here I can say current book. Okay, and if current book is null, then we'll throw not found exception. Okay, then we will use some simple JavaScript function. Okay, object.assign, okay, current book with the book DTO that I'm getting from this update book DTO, right? Then return this dot book repository dot save and save which book? The current book. Now coming to the delete part, what we will do? We'll say const result equals to await, okay, this dot book repository dot, okay, delete, and it will take the id. Okay, so it will delete by this id. Okay, and if, okay, result dot affected and result dot affected is greater than 0, that means how many rows were affected because of this delete, right? So if this affected field is available and it is greater than 0, okay, what we will do? We will say return true. That means something has been deleted, right? Else return false. That means we could not delete, right? So this is how we are going to use the basic CRUD functionality in our service layer. Okay, and here I should use this dot app data source. Okay, now what we will do next? We will update our controller. So we'll go to controller. Okay, and if you see, we are already using this service method from the previous video. So here what we have to do? We have to mark all this function as async, right? So let me quickly do that. Now these are the controller functions, right? And if you remember, we are calling this in our app.ts. So that handler call, that also should be marked as async, right? So what we will do? We will come to app.ts, okay, and here in controllers.for each, I will come to this instance function, right? This is where we are calling our handler with the arguments, right? So here I will just add a await on this, okay, because this is the ultimate controller call, right? So since we have marked our controller as async, right, we have to await on this, right? Now let us open our terminal and see if there are any error. So our server is running properly. Then I'll come to postman, okay, and I will send a request. So if you see, we don't have any book items, right? So what we can do, let us create a book item. And if you see, we are getting some error, right? So let us check what is that error. So it is saying author name is not provided, right? So what we can do, we can come here and we can say migration down. That author name, okay, that was just an example, right? So I will remove that one, right? So now let me open the database and let me do a refresh. So if you see, the author name is gone, right? And after this, I'll come to my entity and I'll remove this also, right? This is not needed. Then I will come to postman and I'll try to send a request, right? So if you see, now the value is properly inserted. That means we are getting 201 created and we are getting a response back. So if you check the database, okay, instead of migrations, let me query the book. So if you see, one entry has been created in the database, right? So now if you go to get all books, okay, we will get this book, right? And this book has id 2. So if I come here and add this 2 as the id and send a request, see, I'm able to get the value, right? Now I'll copy this one, okay, and I will paste it here, and this should be ID2, okay, and the price and the pages, it is saying 312, right? So let me make it 400, right? This is for, so this example of update book, right? So now if I send the request, so you will see a bad request. Okay, so what is the problem here? See, if you come to get book by ID, the price is coming as a decimal value, and this is coming in double quotes. That means it is being treated as string. Okay, so so what this database is doing, it is converting this to string so that it doesn't lose the precision. So for this, we have to do some magic in our entity so that this will be converted to regular floating point value, right? Or the float value, right? So let me show you how to do that. So you come to this column, okay, price column, and here we can say type as decimal, okay, and there is a transform function, okay. So we are going to use this transform function. So it takes a 2, okay. So value from number to value, okay, and from value of type string, okay. So I'll say parse float of value, okay. So from this number, okay, from this number to this parse float value, okay, we are doing this transformation, okay. So now we will come to our database, okay, and we will send another request, right? So if you see, now this is coming not as a string but as a proper float value, right? So I will copy this, okay, I will paste it here, and I will change this to 400, okay. And what I will do, I will send the request. So if you see, now it is changed to 400. So if I do this get book by ID, see, now it is showing 400. Now what I can do, I can come to delete, okay, and I'll try to delete, okay. So it has successfully deleted 204, no content. And if I come here and send this request, now it is saying not found, right? That means the book is deleted, okay. So now we have successfully completed one round of CRUD operation. So in the last video, we completed our typeorm setup, and we were able to do a basic round of CRUD operation starting from Postman till the database, right? Now what we want to do, so majority of the framework that we were supposed to build is complete. Now I want to do a small refactoring. Okay. So if you see here, our base application, it has logic of Express middleware as well as initialize controller, right? So this I want to move it to the core. Okay. So this I don't want to be the part of this main application. Okay. This main application should be very clean. Okay. So for this, what I can do, I can come to this core classes, and here I'll add a new class. So here I can say base application dot ts, okay, and here I can say export abstract class, okay, base application, right? And if you see, I'm using the abstract keyword because this I don't want anyone to create an instance of, right? It should always be extended by this app, okay. So here what I can do, I can say constructor, and here let me copy, okay, these two function, or cut these two function from here and add it here, okay. And if you see here, we have some commented out code, so this we can remove. And here also we have some commented out code, so this also we can remove. Now it is giving this application, right? So what I can do here, so here this is going to be private, okay, app, and this is going to be of type express dot application. And here I have to import express, okay. So import express from express, okay. Now let us take this controller, so it will come from request, and this route also we can do auto import, and this container also we can take it from type di, and this I middleware, okay. From here we can get from interfaces, okay. Then this HTTP handler. Okay, this also we can import. Then this transform value, this also we can import. And it is saying request doesn't have params. Okay, so what we can do, we can import this request and response from Express. Okay, now if we do this, the params error is gone. Okay, what else is pending? What error we have? We have plain to instance. This will come from class transformer, and this should come from class validator. Okay, and response status code by method. So this also will import, and the not found error class. This also we can import. Okay. Now here, what we have to do? Here, what I will do first. So I will extend it from the base application. Okay. So extends base application. Okay. And here, what we need in the constructor, we need the data source. Okay. So we'll keep that, and book controller we don't need here, right? This also we don't need here, book controller. And if you see this app, okay, this is already initialized here, so we don't need this here. Okay, here what I can do, I can remove all of this, and I can simply do a super call. Okay, and let me remove the space. And what it is giving, it is giving two error. Okay, config service and app. Let us see. So here app, if I mark it as protected, okay, so now this app I can use in the child class. So this error is gone. Now config service. Okay, so for config service, what I can do, I can say protected. Okay, config service of type config service, and here I can say this dot config service equals to, okay, container dot get config service. Now if I come here, okay, I have an instance of the config service which is coming from the base application, right? So now if you see, this is the only function that is related to the database that will be decided by the child application, and it has a start method, right? One more thing that I can do is define another abstract function, start. Okay, so public abstract start. Okay, and this is going to return a promise of void or a normal void. Okay, so what will happen, anybody who is extending this class, okay, they will be forced to implement this function, right? Because this is an important function, right? We are using it to start our application, right? So by creating this abstract class, I'm forcing the extender to have this method definition, right? And we have the database initialization logic. Everything else, okay, is moved to our core framework, right? This core framework or this base application is handling the initialize controller as well as initialize express middleware logic. Okay, and in this constructor, okay, let us add all the functionalities. Okay, so this dot app equals to express. Okay, and this dot initialize express middleware, and this dot initialize controllers. Okay, now what we can do, whatever we don't need here, okay, this we can remove. Okay, so this I can remove, and this container also I can remove, and this express and book controller, everything can be removed, right? So now if you see how neat and clean our base application, our application class is looking. Okay, we don't have any unnecessary logic here. Everything is refactored into base application. Okay, and here if you come to book service, okay, this book hard-coded array, this also I can remove, right? And with this, our Express and TypeScript framework setup is completed, right? All our core logic is available here, and anybody who wants to create the application, they can make use of this framework. Before we proceed any further, if so far you are liking this video, give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, because this is the kind of content I bring on this channel on a regular basis. Now let's continue to the video.